cost management, and change. To put it simply, today is all about factors that impact your bottom line. In other words, it's all about the money. With the current economic developments, every business leader is looking to manage debts, reduce costs, and boost liquidity. Let's be honest, that is what is on everyone's minds. But what are we doing about it? More importantly, what can you do about it? Well, that's exactly what our experts hope to share with you as part of the event agenda. So, sit back, enjoy, and take notes. Before we head to the real meat on today's bones, let's set a tone with SME Advisors co-founder Gina Larson. She likes an applause, so please put your hands together whilst we play some fake claps as well.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Oh my God, I am loud. Am I too loud? I'm too loud. I think I just suddenly went right into your eardrums. Better now? Okay, fantastic. I like how I'm only catering to you as a conversation. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of our Success Series brought to you by SME Advisor. I'm going to take these off because they're glaring for me. I am here today with a very different purpose of starting this event. Normally, I've come into these events and I've always been the one there, the MC, introducing everyone. I'm the one sitting in the desk behind, trying to make certain that all the presentations run correctly. And I have someone to blame for this position. That's my co-founder, Nadeem Hood. Where are you? There. He's waving. So he spoke to me a week ago, and he told me, I want you to present. My reaction? Hell no! I'm not doing that. His second, he said, Gina, I want you to present, and I want you to talk slowly. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a bullet train. I speak 100 words a minute. I can rap better than Eminem. I can actually speak louder and faster than all of you put together in this room. So slowly is going to be a task, but I'm going to try. But it was the third thing he told me that made me reevaluate my position. He told me, I want you to be you. I want you to get real. And I want you to talk from your heart. Now, we're in media. We don't talk from our heart. We tend to put up conferences and we all look pretty and everything's fantastic. It's the selfie culture. I'm happy, you're happy. Cash flow, we've got tons of it. The world is great, the economy is wonderful. Politics, oh my God, we love the West. It's a culture where we promote happy all the time. And I found this out because I went onto Google and I decided to Google search workplace, images. Do you know what you find? Very happy people. You find images of everyone shaking hands and contracts and signing business deals. And you have to put in angry workplace, frustrated workplace, to find people who are actually angry or it's real. I went onto my LinkedIn and realized that every 4 posts is someone hiring. I was telling this to someone earlier. I decided to test it out. I went to 56 different people, 56, and I applied for a position. I just wanted to check if they would come back and look at my profile. They didn't. They didn't even look at my profile. 56 applications. They didn't even look at who I was. So why were they advertising? I went into my Facebook and realized that everyone, including my mother and her dog, is extremely happy. And yet, we put out a survey to all of our SMEs, and that's how we came up with a conversation today about cash flow. Because everyone was telling us the real problem today is that the economy is crap. If I get deported for this, UAE government, I was born here, I love you guys, but I'm going to state the truth. I promised I would. Everyone's in speculation, everyone is struggling, everyone's having a hard time. And when you look at that conversation, no one actually gets real about the conversation. So I decided to get real. So when I decided to get real, I decided that I needed to have a conversation for you guys that had to deal with cash flow, cost management, or change. It's such a sexy topic, right? Cash flow, cost management, and change. I can't believe all of you actually turned up for a conversation like this. Y'all are mad. Y'all spent Thursday coming in to a conversation on cash flow. So did I. So to make the conversation a little more interesting, I thought, let me start off with words from a gentleman I love called Elvis Presley. I changed it. A little less jargon, a little more action, please. And let me tell you why. I come from a history of realizing that lots of people talk lots of crap. I said the word again. It's a good thing I don't use the other words I use in meetings. A lot of crap about how workplaces should be, how things should be, win-win, synergies. Let's take it to the top. Let's find a way to effectively work together. And what I've realized along the way is nobody is giving me a to-do list. Nobody is telling me what to do or how to do it. In fact, I remember once I had a conversation with a boss of mine who landed up telling me, Gina, I need you to be more proactive. I said, okay. With regards to what? Like, no, generally. I need you to be proactive. Like, so do you want me to come in early, get you coffee, shine your shoes? Or do you want me to make your presentations? What do you want me to do? Tell me my to-do list so that our expectations are met. And I realized in workplaces we don't do that. Lots of mumbo-jumbo. And that is where I want to start off today's conversation as to why you are here and why I am here. This day started off with the survey. As I mentioned to you, 67% of our SMEs came back to us and told us cash flow was the number one conversation. Another 13%, the second highest, talked about change. The rest of them were sending us a CV. But those are the two big conversations. Cost management, we threw in there for fun. Why are you here? We asked very, very humbling questions over the past 4 weeks. And we found some amazing individuals who are going to share the stage with me today to address those questions. So I'm going to start off the reality check going, when I look at my cash flow, I want to pull my intestines out, shove them through my ears, slit my wrists, sell my kidney. As a bonus, give away my arm and my leg. And just for the benefit of it, I'll give you 4 of my toes. That's how cash flow makes me feel. I can't imagine the state of any of you is any different. We're entrepreneurs. We wake up, it's the first and the last thing on our minds. So let's address the conversation today with a reality check. You're not here because you looked at that tagline and thought, yeah, that's a sexy conversation. I'm just going to turn up and have some fun. You did not think you were going to come here and someone was going to miraculously hand you a little book, a little black book, and you were going to have every solution, and you're going to walk out, and $1 million is going to be sitting in your bank account. You came here because you were hoping that one of all the people speaking up here today were going to give you some idea, some inclination, some hope that you could look at something differently. So today I'm going to ask you to communicate. I'm not asking you to take out your business card and go to the next person and try to make business happen. I'm asking you to talk to each other and find out how you can each find a way. Maybe you did it better. I have cash flow ideas that I have tried on my own business. Maybe you have. Maybe we can trade that information. Maybe we've both been through something we can actually talk about. And to put my money where my mouth is, that would be a lot of money. But to put my money where my mouth is, I can tell you that every person coming up here today is not somebody I reached out to because they were uberly famous. They are. Not because they were uberly qualified. They are. But they are people who have turned into friends. People who I reach out to because they can humbly tell me to my face, straight out, what I'm doing right or wrong. Every single person who comes up here today is approachable. So I'm not asking you for a Q&A session. You will not get one. Because Q&As means there's 3 of you with extremely long arms, or sitting in the first 4 tables, who will get a chance to respond or ask a question. I'm asking you to go onto these people's LinkedIn profiles and connect with them. If you cannot reach them, reach out to me, ask me the question, and I promise you, I will get you an answer. People today who are going to share the stage with me is the likes of Mr. Ralph Khoury from TBWA. I adore him. From the first time we met a couple of years ago, it was instant conversation. A realist at heart. You're going to meet the likes of George, celebrated his birthday 2 days ago, so all of you should clap when he comes on stage. He's going to be highly embarrassed I said that. Mr. Aditya Sarna, who had a baby boy yesterday. Congratulations, Aditya. You know I was going to do this, right? What I'm trying to tell you is this. Get to know who you're talking to. Talk to them. Have a conversation. And that is where I'm going to move to the next part. To prove to you, I did it. That was my LinkedIn post that got 12,000 views when I was looking for a speaker. Maybe several of them were looking for a job, I'll be honest. But I never followed protocol. Protocol means I was supposed to put out a wonderful post that said, looking for speakers, send us a paper, we would like to validate you. Jargon, jargon, jargon. Instead, I said, can you recommend someone in the numbers game who can articulate blah, blah, blah? I'm looking someone with personality, someone who's sexy with numbers. So first thing, everyone up here today is very sexy with numbers. This is to prove to you that it's not about who you know. It's about having the guts to reach out to someone who does. That's what communication is. But what gives me the right to talk about this? This was the prettiest picture I could find. And I'm an accountant too. So I don't stand here making claims about cash flow because I read it and it was the most trending article on LinkedIn. I stand here because I trained in this. I was fascinated with numbers ever since I was 5. I decided to buy soap and sell it back to my parents because I could make 25 fills a soap bar. I have been fascinated my whole life. In fact, in university, my only version of trying to be cool was I had to learn to play the drums to one song of Guns N' Roses so that I could actually be cool because I was part of the math club. I was the geek. When you look at that, what makes numbers so important? I came up with 2 lines. One was numbers don't lie. People do. Interpretation is based on the interpreter. So when you look at numbers, and I could sit for 15 hours looking at numbers and I'm in heaven. Don't send me to a spa, send me with numbers. What I realized was sometimes in the game, as an accountant, I was trained to report. I was trained to turn around and tell my boss, you're dying, you have no money, you're in the red. Or I was trained to turn around and tell him, you have money, but it'll not last. I was almost trained to be negative. I can blatantly tell you, when I looked at numbers, I was trained to be negative. I remember when I went into the working world, I had this beautiful vision of what working world would be, that I would be walking out glamorously in cars and people would be listening to me in big shiny buildings. None of that happened. This facade never happened. Happy moments never happened. What I realized along the way was a lot of jargon. I would sit into conversations that would go and tell me about words like, you need to be proactive, you need to win, you need to try for results. And all along the way, from being in the corporate world for about 16 years, to being an entrepreneur, don't ask me my age, I'll ask you your income, I realized that this is what fuels our day. I can describe this slightly better with a video I'm about to show you. And the reason this video is important is because I can guarantee after the video, every single one of you has gone through it higher than 50% in your workplace. Anyone who's gone through it lesser than 50%, I need to talk to you and I need to work for you.
All right. Let's play hardball.
So how are we going to position ourselves?
Let's hit the ground running.
Let's hammer this out.
Let's get our ducks in a row here, guys.
All right, here's the 30,000-foot view.
Let's drill that down.
I'll beef it up.
Can you put a deck together?
Look, I'll do most of the heavy lifting.
Okay, I'll put my feelers out.
Can you send me the dial-in?
What's the dial-in?
Hey, Lauren, what's the dial-in?
I just pinged her.
Somebody ping Carl.
Loop me in on that.
Loop me in on that, will you?
Can you guys loop me?
So what space are you guys in?
Is this B2B?
We're B2C.
Is it C2C?
We're B to C to B.
We're B2C to B, but back to C, sort of. Sometimes A.
We're a brick and mortar.
We're soup to nuts.
Okay, let's ideate.
So what's their value proposition?
What platform are you using?
Who did their UI?
They're UX.
CSS.
IP.
ICUP.
She's C-level.
She's an acquihire.
A serial entrepreneur.
A disruptor.
A total disruptor.
That dude is a coding ninja. This new app is cutting edge.
Leading edge.
Seamless.
End to end.
Game changing.
Disruptive.
World class.
Freemium.
It's pretty much the Uber of food trucks.
It's the Uber of dry cleaning.
It's like the Uber of tax auditing.
It's like the Uber of taxis.
What are the deliverables?
Are those baked in?
Are those included in our best practices?
Is that actionable?
I'm gonna have to marinate on that.
I'm not willing to die on that hill.
I'm worried about the unknown unknowns.
I'm worried about the known knowns. What's our launch date?
Do we have a drop dead date?
It's gonna be 11th hour.
It is ODark 30.
Look, we need more wiggle room.
All right. We'll have to do it on the cheap.
Now, is that gross?
Is that net?
Is that gross or net?
Is that net?
That's net?
Can you unpack that?
What's your guesstimate?
That dovetails perfectly into my idea.
I hope I made a point. You've all been in meetings, right? How much time in a day do you spend in meetings that come out without one actionable point? How many times have you been in meetings, conferences, where you've sat here taking time out of your day to commit, and you have not got one iota, one line that you will remember on Friday morning? That is what we're hoping to change today. We're not inventing new jargon. So I'm going to make a request two ways. I'm going to make a request to my fantastic speakers. You are going to present, and I've seen your presentations, and they're amazing. I'm asking you at the end of your presentation to give one point to the audience, one actionable point that they can walk away with and they can implement, and it is strategic and driven. Everyone in this room, considering I'm not allowing you to actually indulge in a Q&A, I'm asking you to interact. Interact with each other, interact with us, interact with the speakers, and if you cannot do that, go onto social media. Make it live. Ask me a question on social media. By virtue of you asking me on social media, I have to respond to you. I will find an answer. If we can interact and ask hard-hitting questions, we will find answers. That's all we can do. We know times are tough. So getting to the point today, I'll give you one last example before I actually close out on this, I'll prove it to you all the way up in politics. John F. Kennedy made a mission statement, and I'm going to read it to you. I need to get closer because I don't have my glasses on. I'm slightly blind. Our mission is to become the international leader in the space industry through maximum team-centered innovation, strategically targeted aerospace initiatives. All of you are his team. What does he want you to do? Anyone? Because I had no clue. I looked at this and I was like, wow, this is as good as my ex-boss. No clue. So what did JFK actually say? It was so simple. He wanted to put a man on the moon and bring him back alive in the decade. Would you not be able to, if all of you were his team, understand this? That is the communication we are missing in this day and age. So it's time to get real. This is what my co-partner told me. He said, I need you to get real. I need you to say what you think. I think times are tough. I think this market is tough. I think this country is tough. And everyone looks at us from the outside. I have friends who call me the entrepreneur, as if I have a special status. And because they know I have an accounting background, they're like, oh my God, you must be sorted. You must be doing so well because I take zero risk. How can I be doing well as an entrepreneur? But nobody wants to know the details. I bet nobody in your company wants to know the details. So if you're in the accounting field, please reach out to your bosses, reach out to your partners, reach out to your CEOs, and explain to them the possibilities of what that red number at the end of their balance sheet looks like and what it can do. If you are the CEO and owner of a company, I know numbers are ugly. Most people tell me that. My husband wants to divorce me every time I talk about numbers. To me, it's sexy, but need you to look at the potential of those numbers. And that's why you'll have people like Binod today who are going to talk about the basics. The insanity of looking at your revenue, the pride you look at your revenue with and you go, oh my God, I'm making lots of money. But if you don't have money to pay people, making money on a piece of paper is worthless. So getting real today is the biggest conversation. Second part, communicating to each other, to all of us. If you've taken time to come here, please, I beg you, do not sit and listen. Write down a question. You have Ralph coming up next. You have a question for Ralph? Get onto LinkedIn and reach out to him. Write to me and ask me the question. Get your answer from the person you have communicated today. Communication, I've stressed this enough. Keeping it simple. Forget the jargon. I'm not standing here and telling you you're going to win today, this is going to be amazing, you're going to have lots of takeaways. No. Let's see, at the end of today, if I ask you one question, did you get one thing that your business can be better off with? And you say yes, my job is done. At the end of this, considering there are lots of speakers, and you're not going to remember me, and you're not going to remember most of what I said. I'm going to give you my last slide, which will go viral. We're live on Facebook at the moment. It's the only thing people care about these days. Right? Okay, that didn't even work. Man, I thought that was a good joke. All right, thanks, everyone. I hope you have a fantastic day. And any questions, you will find me in the room. See ya.
Now, we are going to set the scene for the day. We'd like to invite on stage someone who can step back and give us an overview of what's currently happening within the finance landscape. He is someone with his finger on the pulse. Please welcome Ralph Curry, Regional Chief Financial Officer, TBWA RAAD.
Betsy dear.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please send Mr. Disney in.
Mr. Stone Street.
Mr. Disney, please.
Does that sound okay? Yeah, okay. So, I'm here today. The topics of cash flow, cost management. I think the whole agenda of today is driven around that. Change is what I'm going to focus on, and what we can do to make a difference. I'm going to start the presentation with a short video, and think about this video in terms of your own business and how you could relate to it.
Betsy dear.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please send Mr. Disney in.
Mr. Stone Street.
Mr. Disney, please. Come in, welcome.
Thank you.
Have a seat, sir.
4 more hours, sir.
So a total of 15 hours?
Yes, and then about 3 or 4 more hours of me just thinking about it.
Thinking. I'm not sure I want to fund you for your thinking, sir. But here's what I'm prepared to do. Let's say a total of 17 hours for your time spent. At your going rate of $5 per hour, I am prepared to write you a check for $85 today, sir.
Mr. Stone Street, that sounds wonderful. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Take care of yourself, sir. So how long did it take you to rename the character?
4 more hours, sir.
So a total of 15 hours?
Yes, and then about 3 or 4 more hours of me just thinking about it.
Thinking. I'm not sure I want to fund you for your thinking, sir. But here's what I'm prepared to do. Let's say a total of 17 hours for your time spent. At your going rate of $5 per hour, I am prepared to write you a check for $85 today, sir.
Mr. Stone Street, that sounds wonderful. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Take care of yourself, sir.
Wow. That's Mickey Mouse, sold for $85. With little regard for the perpetual value of that character. Unbelievable. Do you guys face that every day? Do you guys face the problem of looking at the labor costs and the time and materials as a function of determining your price for your clients? If that's your issue, then this is the same problem this guy has. I mean, I'd love the comment that was made in there, I don't want to pay you for your thinking. Can you imagine not wanting to be paid for your thinking? And that's really what happened here. Clearly, money was left on the table and it was sold way too short. I'm sure every time you go and have conversations with your clients, you feel the same way when they're trying to benchmark you to a cost that you may incur rather than the value that you bring to their business, which is the key. Don't get me wrong, costs are important. You need to manage your costs. That's Accounting 101 or Business Management 101. You need to manage your labor costs. You need to make sure you're sourcing the best or the lowest material costs you can in the market. And you need to manage your overheads. So you need to do those. Without doing those, everything else doesn't work. So it does have value. However, the prices that you charge your valued clients should not be derived from labor and materials. Ask the question, what is the value of what I'm selling? And challenge your business model. The challenging of your business model, looking at a different way of selling. How often have you gone to a client, presented them a solution or a product, and said to them, it's not for sale. It's not for sale. I'm sure if you ever said that to them, 2 weeks later, they will actually want to know what it costs, and then you can price whatever you like. Because there is a wonder there. Why is it not for sale? Don't sell it to them. Sell them a right to use it for a period of time. Break the convention. Break the convention of just selling based on your cost structure. Find the value that the client will get eventually. Yeah, please. Yeah, let me go back here. Sure. Let's get to the end, and I think it'll become a little bit clearer. Okay. So what we're saying is that the pricing that you should charge to your client should not necessarily be based on the costs that you incur to develop that product. It should be based on the value it gives to the end client, the value it gives them to develop their own business, okay? Because that's the value at the end of the day, okay? These are the three keys if I wanted to wrap up this short session. You've got to manage your costs. This goes without saying. Secure value with the prices that you secure with your clients. But you've got to have those conversations with the CXOs, not with procurement. Who here is from procurement? Anyone? Okay, one guy. Sorry to bring this on to you, but honestly, having the conversations with the procurement will end up just driving down your prices. You need to have those conversations with the CXOs in order, because they understand the value of what you bring to the table, not the procurement guy who's trying to benchmark you to the lowest cost. So have those conversations with the right people. Finally, we heard it earlier with Gina, disruption. It is real. This is a philosophy that the company I represent, TBWA RAD, does cherish. It's in the heart of everything that we do. Basically looking at what we do and breaking a market convention. This is what disruption is all about. And it's really when you look at challenger brands and how they make their own space and how they grow at a very strong pace, a lot of it's driven by changing what they do, being disruptive in how they do it, and approaching it in a totally different manner to what the industry has been used to. We've seen numerous examples of that over the years, thinking differently. If you recall, Apple is a good example. That's one of our clients, by the way. They took the approach of thinking differently, and we know where they are today. We've seen a lot of newcomers, Uber, do that as well, thinking differently, taking a different approach. Airbnb, these are just new brands, new challenger brands that have come into the market with a different approach in order to generate value, generate growth, and eventually profits and cash. So that's all I had for you guys this morning. Feel free to reach out to me, as Gina mentioned. I hope there's a takeaway out there for you. Certainly disruption, I feel strongly about that. It's not a buzzword. There's some value behind it. Think about it when it comes to your business. I'm sure there is something you can change and disrupt in order for you to secure some value in the market. Thank you very much.
So, we have a snapshot of the current landscape, and now it's time to take this learning and convert it into action. To tell us how and to share some practical tips, we'd like to call on stage Blake Patterson, Director, EY.
morning, everyone. It's great to be here and see so many people engaged in this topic. Of course, we're working with a lot of organizations right now in finding ways to bring the role of the CFO to a different level and help transform the business, not from the traditional sense, but from a strategic way of helping the organization grow and change through these types of times. Just to kick off quickly, we've developed a point of view around the challenges that we're facing in this region within the GCC. And so just wanted to briefly talk about that. We're challenged with similar challenges that other regions are facing, but there's three key topics, three areas that we've seen that cause an increased challenge, a more complex challenge in a more complex environment. The first is that there's immediate requirement for cost reduction in organizations that has to happen right away. It can't take time. It can't be over the next year, 2, 3 years. It needs to happen now. The second thing is that there's nationalization agendas that need to be addressed. And so that's causing quite a challenge with organizations to reduce costs yet meet that requirement. And at the same time in the region, we're faced with higher expectations with our customers, internally as CFOs and finance organizations, there's increased expectations of quality of service. And so those three challenges create a conflict that is complex to overcome. And that's where these disruptive technologies come in to help resolve that. So I know you'll be talking later or hearing later about RPA, and I won't go into detail on that, but we see that as a key enabler to meeting those three challenges because it reduces costs quickly. It enables a nationalization agenda to be met because it changes the ratio and labor mix within your organization. And it increases the quality of the service that you provide as finance and other enabling functions as well within organizations to increase the quality. So as a cost reduction element, it meets that needs along with the other parts that really enhance the quality and the key challenges that we face in the region. In addition to that, there are a number of disruptive forces that are at play. So if you think of this, and the topic that I'm talking about now is CFOs, how to reduce costs and still survive. So in this environment that we're in, that is highly complex, we're also realizing that there are some key disruptive technologies that are creating additional challenges, but they're also enablers in being able to reduce costs. So a couple of them, big data and analytics, RPA, robotics process automation that I just spoke about. Cybersecurity is causing complexity within organizations and risks. Cloud, blockchain, enablers, a lot of ways of enhancing efficiency and reducing costs. And then regulatory, again, another complex area that's being introduced, VAT and IFRS requirements. So the role of the CFO is working in a very dynamic environment that has a lot of complex challenges, but also enablers to help reduce costs. So the role of the CFO in the organization as an enabler to helping the business grow, an enabler to helping achieve strategic initiatives and imperative activities within your organization, also has to continue to be the one who is driving the cost reduction, right? So together with leaders in the organizations, the CEO and other CXOs needs to team up and be a partner in organizations in driving those costs down. So typically, the role of the CFO has normally been scorekeeper, custodian, but what we're seeing with organizations, we're working a lot with CFOs, is to push them into that business partner role. And so in the context as an enabler of reducing costs within an organization, but also helping with strategy, it's about getting CFOs into that business partner role within organizations, teaming up with CEOs, teaming up with other executives to drive value and reduce costs in the organization. So we see that as an effective model, an effective role for finance to play in this type of environment as well, right? So coming to the table as a bookkeeper, yeah, absolutely. Scorekeeper, you have to do that. Absolutely as a custodian to keep the assets. But really thinking strategically and practically and pragmatically around how finance and CFOs are going to help the organization reduce costs. We've also identified a lot of key success factors around cost reduction with organizations. And one of the biggest things that we've seen is that it needs to be connected to the strategy and the vision of the organization. So if you think about an organization that's focused on providing high quality service, providing excellent customer care, providing, the great prices, all that critical stuff that is directly linked to the vision of what you deliver as an organization. When you're going through cost reduction exercises, there's going to be reductions you're going to have to take and hard decisions you need to make. But you need to be very careful and clear around what areas you want to reduce and what areas you need to preserve. Now, that's where the disruptive technologies come in, is because you can reduce costs in areas that are critical to your business strategy, because you are reducing costs and taking away manual effort, but at the same time you're speeding up the quality of service. You're creating a consistent product or customer experience for your organization. And so that's where finance and marketing and sales and all the different areas need to team up together and come up with innovative ways to reduce costs, but yet preserve the strategic intent of the organization. We work a lot with organizations in reducing costs, and this is the model that we use when we work through that process. And how we come at it is we bring people together who are responsible for the different areas and look at the data and figure out where the biggest addressable spend is. As in, what areas of the business can we reduce costs? And it can be activity, it can be relationships or contracts, it can be policies and expense policies that you have in your organization, and it also can be organizational structure. And we look at what are the biggest key addressable spend, key areas that we can target and focus on and have the best impact. So in your organization, when you look at it, you're not going to be able to do everything, right? But you look at what are the key areas that you can reduce the costs and have the greatest impact, 4 or 5 areas in your business. Have a dialogue with the people and parts of the organization that are responsible for those areas, because they know the most about their area of the business. So as a consultant, when we go in, we have a methodology, we have an approach, we have subject matter resource and experts that are that know about every part of the business and where the opportunity is, but it's really the people within the organization in that area that know what can and can't be done, and then there's a challenge as you work through it. And the CFO is at the table and is part of that dialogue to work through that. And then you work through a process of reducing the costs and then really transforming your organization, and it's not easy, but developing a culture within your organization where keeping costs down and cost reduction and being responsible, because you know that if you're reducing your costs and you're being responsible around the areas that aren't creating value for your business, you're able to allocate that into the areas that do create value for your business. And it creates a culture of keeping costs down with an objective of driving value and achieving the business success that you want to achieve. RPA, I know you're going to hear more about it. I don't want to go into it in great detail. We've done a lot of work with organizations with RPA, very specific and focused areas where you can have immediate impact with RPA as a cost reduction enabler. Increases the speed of transactions, processing, increases the quality of what you provide, and at the same time, cost reduction is achieved. So, in today's environment, a lot of people are talking about how do we reduce labor costs? How do we change the labor mix? How do we reduce labor, right? RPA also provides an opportunity to move people from areas that don't create value in the business, maybe top performers who are doing something that takes a lot of time, and allocating them to areas that do create value in the business, right? Or within finance, how do you bring people who are doing all this manual effort, who are doing these activities that take up so much time and provide so little value for the organization, and move them up into areas where they do create value for the organization? And RPA has the ability to do that. And you'll hear more about it later today as well. Now, kind of circling back up to change, you know, I've gone through this a lot with organizations and how to reduce costs, yet, you know, survive as a CFO in an organization, be successful as a CFO in an organization, have finance as a successful part of the business to create value and drive value for the organization, and help achieve the overall strategic objectives. Now, that's easier said than done. That's much, much easier said than done. But what it takes is excellent, excellent leadership, a very clear view as leaders to know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and tying it all back to the purpose of the organization that is so crystal clear that you can have the conversations with other executives in your organization and get aligned around what that looks and feels like. So if cost reduction is an important thing, you need to talk about it. And one person might think one thing about cost reduction, another person might think something completely different, right? Maybe you align, you become clear, and then you're able to drive that message throughout the organization in a very sequenced, timed process to make sure that you're able to articulate the messages that you want to provide and the purpose of why you're doing it. And you've got a way of making sure that the organization is going to support you through it. It doesn't always happen in terms of support, but it's critical from a change management, and we use the word change management a lot, but it's really change leadership. So how are you as a change leader in your organization going to drive this out? And it's critically important to be able to do that as you embark on this type of journey in cost reduction. As far as a key takeaway that Gina mentioned at the beginning that you can do right out of this conference today is to think about a person in your organization that you can meet with as soon as possible to talk about this. And you may already have those relationships, you may already be doing it, you may be far along the journey, but who is it in your organization that you can have this conversation with to be able to drive that change in the organization? And start to develop a clear view of what that looks like and how you can work through it. Thank you. Any questions? Great, thank you.
The expert who will speak next will share insights on boosting growth and building financial resilience. Please join us in welcoming Etisalat, Managing Director, United World Infrastructure.
So I'm not a natural born speaker, so I prefer to stand behind the podium and not walk on the stage. What I'm going to talk about today is understand how we can look at businesses a little differently. I have no doubt whatsoever that all of you know your businesses the best. And all I'm trying to do is to say, can we look at businesses a little differently? And I'm trying to use physics, which I think is simpler than business, to try and illustrate my point. This particular slide, a lot of people read differently, where, it's that classic, if you keep going at it, I'm sorry, I can't really hear myself, it's too loud. If you keep going at it, you'll reach, your destination. In business, sometimes it's also good to stop. So, So the whole concept, I think, when Gina first spoke to me was to talk about, how we can build a resilient business that's sustainable. And in my mind, resilience is bounce. It's the bounce of a tennis ball. It's this whole thing of getting back up. It's the thing about grit. And it's the ability to recover in one sense. So I thought, how do I best try and illustrate bounce in a business context? It wasn't easy, so I moved to physics. I think a lot of us understand the basics of physics, and bounce is basically force, which is mass into acceleration. The key point to note over here is that mass is not weight. Weight needs gravity, and mass is an intrinsic property of matter. It doesn't change. A tennis ball is a tennis ball. Cone of lead is lead. You can't really change it. And the way to look at it as a business, the way to look at resilience from a business perspective, I thought that maybe we need to define what is an intrinsic property of a business. And to me, the intrinsic property of a business is cash flows. And why I say that is that, cash flows occur, they happen. You don't need an accountant to tell you that cash flow is happening. Profits, on the other hand, are accounting measures and, receivables and so on and so forth. So I wanted to focus on saying, how do we think about our businesses from a very, very intrinsic point of view? And that answer was that, what is the type of cash flows that my business, generates? So if you look at cash flows as an intrinsic part of a business and compare that to what we would call density, in physics. So, lead is more dense than wood and so on and so forth. Is how do we make our businesses more dense? How do we make them more solid? And when you look at it, how do we ineffectively strengthen our cash flows? I sort of break those answers into, these 3 or 4 categories. The number one category, and I know it sounds like a cliche, talent and human capital and stuff like that, but the fact is, no business exists without people. So, it's not that a product appears on the market and then somebody tries to sell it. Actually, a product is first developed and designed by somebody who's then trying to sell it. And over here, in all the years that one has been in the business world, I follow a very simple mantra, which is you hire for attitude and you pay for aptitude. So what do I mean by that? You are trying to hire a junior accountant. You will try and hire somebody who you think fits within your organization. And that is the attitude. So, you're looking for certain subjective qualities. They're not easy to measure, but that is what I call attitude. You will pay that person based on his or her educational experience, education qualifications, experience, long-term fit, how do you see them going forward in your organization? And sometimes we mix the two. We tend to hire people that we like, which is a normal cognitive bias. Everybody likes to see mirror images of themselves. So you end up hiring people just for attitude and paying them for attitude. And then very quickly, disappointment sets in because you hired somebody who was not, fit enough for the role that you wanted, and you hired them because you just liked them. So that's the key difference between hiring for attitude and paying for aptitude. The other thing is hire slowly, fire quickly. So take your time in making that hiring decision. All of us, tend to be in a hurry. Somebody or the other has pressure. We need the sales guy. He's gone. Hire slowly. And if you made a hiring mistake, fire quickly. It's tough, it's unpleasant, it's messy, but fire them quickly. I'm not so sure about the source of this information, but they say that if you make a bad hire and you have to then fire and rehire, that's generally equal to 11 months' salary of the person you just fired or just hired. So be deliberate in your decisions to hire. The final point is, and a lot of us, who exist in the SME world, will probably shrug their shoulders when I mention this thing. Include variable pay in the package. Everybody will say, oh, we are not a Google, and we are not Microsoft, and we don't give 3 months bonus, and we don't do, commissions, look at my cost structure. If you want to go from being an SME to a stable company, you need to have people who are incentivized to take you there. So, if you think that you're going to hire somebody bright who's going to work for a fixed salary, very quickly what happens is that the marginal value of that person will reduce because he or she will figure out that whether or not I do more work or less, I'm still going to get my paycheck. So that needs to be, you need to incentivize that, and I think small companies need to stop shying away from having a bonus or some sort of performance-based incentive. You can afford it. Those people will let you afford it. So do that. Then I come back to the issue of the density of the depth of service or the product that you're offering. And these are all self-evident. I'm not going to spend too much time. Your product or service needs to have the best features, best service, and pricing. And the example I want to give here is that how sometimes, you need to think about it differently. So many years ago, I used to work for Jumbo Electronics. And I don't know, I think I see people in the room who might still remember that we used to have a product called a VCP. It was called a video cassette player. The first innovation on the video cassette player was something called VCP plus R. VCP with recording. So it was not a video cassette recorder. It was a video cassette player with a recording capability, and that was done through some AV in-out, kind of connection. That is innovation, So most people think of it like innovation is the next Google, or innovation is, I don't know, the new Uber. Yes, they are, but there are many different types of innovation. So here we were in the middle of the Middle East. We were principally an agent of Sony. And, we were thinking about markets where basically, emerging markets, not so much disposable income. And it was us sitting somewhere in Dubai brainstorming about how do we, get people to start buying these VCPs because the customers were still, the trade-off was you can't record. So whatever I pay for the VCP is not really worth it because everybody wanted this recording function whether or not they ever recorded anything. So we went back to the factories in Japan and said, you know what, we want recording, but it shouldn't be a VCR. And back and forth, we went through this process and we came up with this VCP plus R. I don't know, we tripled sales or it went up 5 times, but that was not all. So in those days, we used to sell these boxes out of containers in many emerging markets. There were no retail malls in Moscow. South Africa was just opening up. So in many cases, the local dealers would come to the customs bonded warehouse. We would open the container, and these VCPs would be removed from the container directly to these shopkeepers. And what we did was, so the VCPs came in this very nice color printed carton with some picture of Mount Fuji or something on it. And we then put a plastic handle on top of that box. It was a very nice cardboard box, but if you were a trader, you had to sort of lug 3 boxes. All we did was put plastic handles on the boxes so that now you could lift. A lot of these people would buy just 6 VCPs from us. you could lift those 6 boxes now and walk back to your truck or car or cycle or whatever. That gave us an even bigger jump than VCP plus R. So, that's the story I'm trying to say, is that, innovations can be very small things, and they don't necessarily, demand a PhD in physics. Then we look at the other, empirical evidence that you see about density. German companies around the world, German companies are seen as the flag bearers of SMEs. And the reason they are seen as the flag bearers is that because they have extremely dense products and services. So, one small example, family-run business in Germany makes only one thing. They make something called the Jimmy Jib. And the Jimmy Jib is that, crane that movie crews use to shoot moving objects. That is the only product that that company makes, from grandfather to father to son. They don't do anything else. They only make this one mechanized crane that a movie director can put a camera on, and it, does all that. They sell $1 billion of that every year. So, if you are who you are in the movie making business, there is nobody else you go to. Now, I know it's not, necessarily relevant that all businesses have to be so unique and so differentiated, but, it's a key takeaway of building density into the product or offering, product or service that you're offering. Then we come to the customer. I think, especially in terms of working capital management, it is sometimes a clever thing to do to pick your customers. So, I don't know, it is, at least in my SME experience, where, working capital was always a challenge. A lot of the banks say that, we have an SME bank and we have an SME relationship manager, and only thing that an SME relationship manager wants to do is drop your account. So it's very important to think about the customer, and the trade-off is fairly simple. Do you sell to somebody at a higher margin, or do you sell to somebody who gives you your money faster? It's as simple as that. And I go back to my first point, margins are not cash flows. They're accounting measures. So that is something that in the day-to-day rush of, meeting sales targets and, moving working capital, we lose that perspective. So pick your customers carefully, especially in bad times. Then we come to suppliers, and I think it's the same, scenario, in the sense you need to pick your suppliers carefully. What is the supplier brand? What is the terms that the suppliers are offering you? All of that, and I'm not going to, spend too much time telling you about how to deal with suppliers. But one thing that I learned in my days with, Jumbo or other SMEs, is that we as the intermediaries sometimes think, either we know best because, hey, I'm the guy on the, ground, I know what's happening, 2 dirham price difference will, kill this product, etc., etc. So I think short-term, day-to-day activity, I'm sure the SME is more switched on than the principal. However, there is a key difference in expertise that we do not necessarily try and learn from the principal. What do I mean by that? Large companies, while focusing on the day-to-day, also tend to have extremely good forecasting capabilities. So sometimes if you have a supplier, it's not a very difficult thing to have a conversation with them, to ask them, okay, how do you see the world going in selling diesel generators in the next 1 year? And it's a useful exercise for you to see as to how the principal sees it versus how you see it. So, this is something that I would encourage everybody to talk to your principal suppliers to see how they see the world in your industry, because they probably have a better view than you do. This is a specifically Dubai and UAE problem. To take 60 days of credit from your supplier and sell it to your customer for 30 days of credit, it's not a business. So if any one of you is in this business, like a lot of people are, in Dubai especially, it's a zero density business. It's musical chairs, the music will stop. So this is something that people need to really, really think about. That if you're just moving working capital, that's not a business for you. And finally, we hear a lot of self-pity from SMEs. This victim mentality. Banks don't want us, government treats us unfairly, economy is bad. The fact is, you are the economy. You take any country's statistics, I'm not going to bore you with that. 60 to 90% of all businesses in every country are SMEs. The more advanced the market, the higher the percentage of SMEs. 60% or more is generally the people of the employable population is employed by SMEs. Again, more advanced the market, higher the share of people employed by the SMEs. So, you are the economy. If you guys are not doing well, the economy is not doing well. I don't know how much of it is cause and effect, but the fact is SMEs need to think of themselves as being the economy. Cooperate, nice cliche. How do you do that? Difficult. But I think industry-wide pools of expertise, talent, something that people can share without necessarily threatening each other. Silicon Valley is a good example, of how small companies, they have access to a pool of capital. To use economic terms, they have simplified the transaction piece. If you have worked in a startup somewhere and that startup failed, nobody cares about the failure. They mostly care about what you did at that startup. So that's something to think about. The other thing is, is there a pool of capital available for SMEs? Can SMEs do something to set up a fund or things like that? As I said, none of these are easy to do. They were just, thoughts. You obviously compete. So competition is, what I mean to say is that people, yes, again, when you go down to the street, everybody says, oh, competition is only on price. I'm not so sure. Price is one factor of competition, but it can also be, there are other issues of, features, service, what is it that, your relationship with your customer, etc. So this is again something that is a good goal to have, is that you don't compete just on price. And finally, in terms of influence, as I said, if we look at ourselves as being the economy, we should be able to influence the economy. So whether it's, talking to the chambers of commerce or the banking associations or to the government, SMEs need to look at themselves, as this dense pool of businesses that are not, disparate. You are one. And, I think that might help in the overall aid and assistance or credit and things like that SMEs need. Thanks.
Thank you, Aditya. Just before we move to our next presenter, if I can just leave you all with a note. All the presentations you are seeing today will be emailed to you. They will be shared with you. That wasn't me. It will be shared with you. So please, if you want to concentrate on the presentations, don't worry, we will send you all the information. Thank you.
We've heard about the opportunities so far and the scope for financial growth. But what about the challenges? How do you take your obstacles and learn valuable lessons from them? It's our pleasure to invite George Trobb, founder and CEO of Lumina Advisors, to shed some light.
Morning, everyone. Some of you may or may not have heard of us, so I'll give you a quick 10 seconds on who we are. We are a boutique corporate finance advisory firm, and we deal with SME businesses. We help them raise capital, both debt and equity, and we also look at exit options, including mergers and acquisitions on the buy side and the sell side. So when Gina called me a couple of weeks ago and said, would you like to speak at a conference to CFOs about what mistakes they made, I almost put the phone down because I didn't feel qualified to talk about mistakes. And what I actually wanted to really talk about and share with you today is some of the experiences that we see and that we've had with real clients that we've worked with in the SME space. And typically, we look at, in the capital raising cycle, you will have three finance stages. So if you look at any business in terms of the financing cycle, you'll have the first stage, which is capital raising, during funding and post-funding. And what I'm going to share with you today is 10 points that we've come up with, 3 or 4 points on each stage, on what we've experienced with our clients during the process. So let's just look at the 3 stages in terms of what your investors or what your stakeholders will be looking for from an SME, from the management team, and from the company at those stages. So typically, in a capital raising stage, you are asking your investors to put their confidence and their trust in you. Investors are looking for a management team, a business, where they have confidence that that capital raising has been planned to the best possible extent. So, and I'll take you through the points. They're also looking for security at the capital raising stage. What I'm talking about here is not security over your assets or your buildings or your pledges or your families. What I'm talking about is security in terms of how many ways can I not lose money? Has the management, has the business thought about the capital that I put into this business and how secure that capital is? Now, clearly, most SMEs, if not all, are business ventures and they carry business risk. And most investors understand that. But what they're looking for is whether you have understood that and whether you have looked at ways in which to mitigate that. So it gives them security. So a couple of things they're looking for: capital raise, confidence, and security. During funding, very, very important, because a lot of companies go to raise capital and during the funding stage, they either will present a business plan which in 3 weeks' time during the funding stage is not valid anymore because market has changed, circumstances have changed, the cash flows have changed, the funding requirement has changed. So it's very, very important during the funding stage to actually hit your milestones, or if you haven't hit your milestones, inform your investors on why you haven't and analyze why you haven't. And then post-funding, again, your capital providers or your stakeholders are looking for affirmation and they're looking for support. They're looking for information, they're looking for communication on how you've done against your business plan. They're looking for things like, when are you going to come to the market to raise more capital? Do you need more capital? What have you done with the capital? What returns has it yielded, et cetera, et cetera. So again, very, very important in the post-funding stage. So just going through the 3, capital raising. I think one of the things we see most commonly is clients coming to us to raise money when they're out of money. Now, this might sound counterintuitive, but a capital provider, whether it's equity, whether it's debt, whether it's mezzanine finance, whether it's some form of convertible or however else people are investing in your business, they do not want you to come to them when you have run out of money and you have no other options. They would like you to come to them when you have a certain amount of money, for example, 6 to 9 months, and you have planned what your strategy is for the next year, and you are raising money now for the growth of the business in the future, 9 months down the line, 12 months down the line, 18 months down the line. Now, the couple of points I think to note here, which we see from clients, is that when you go to the market and you say, I've got 3 weeks to fund this business, otherwise, we're in big trouble. Going back to the first slide, that doesn't give confidence and it doesn't give security. So I think this is one of the key points that we see. Point 2, management presentations, investor presentations, sitting in front of your capital providers, your stakeholders, your shareholders. What we find is SMEs and generally businesses are extremely good at selling the upside. They're fantastic at talking about, how the business is going to go forward, how many billions of dollars the business is going to make, why they are better than their competitors, etc., which is great. But what they do not do a lot of the time is recognize the downside. And this is not to say that you need to sit there and be pessimistic about your business, but what your investor and your stakeholder wants to know is that you do recognize what the risks are and that you have covered the bases, and you are preempting that to say, okay, well, I am trying to reduce the number of ways in which I can lose money. It's very, very important to actually communicate to the investor or your shareholders or your funders or your capital sources on the fact that you understand how many ways you can lose their money and tell them that what the plans are to mitigate that. Again, still at the capital raising stage, seeking equity as the only source of finance. So this is what we see quite a lot as well. We have clients who would come to us and say, I'd like to raise equity. And the first question is why? Because I need money. Well, there are several sources of finance that you should consider. For example, debt. Now, we all know what the banks think of SMEs, etc., as we've heard before. Nevertheless, there are alternative forms of debt. There are alternative debt capital providers that you can go to. There are, up the food chain, you've got the mezzanine and venture capital providers who are flexible in terms of how they structure that equity return. There is also the customers and suppliers and managing your receivables and payables, or managing your cash flow, as the previous speakers have mentioned before. That is a form of finance as well. So be very careful when you look at your financing options. Don't just immediately default to equity, because at the end of the day, equity is actually the most expensive form of finance you could possibly raise, because at the end of the day, you are giving somebody else your business. So I think that's another point we see. Number 4, not having credible exit plans. So what I mean by this is when we look at capital raising, the first question that an investor or a shareholder or a funder of the business will ask is, okay, that's fantastic, so how do I get my money back? When do I get it back? And what return do I get? And having a credible exit plan, again, adds to that confidence and that security for the investment to go through. Now, exit plans, we see, the key word here is credible, because just having one slide at the end of your presentation that says we're going to be $1 billion in IPO isn't really an exit plan. So, what is the exit plan? Is there a staged exit plan? Do you plan to exit your investors partway through your business strategy? Potentially refinance that investor with private equity when you get to the next stage? Do you have then another tranche where you might have a debt raising capability, and then are you aiming for a trade sale? If you are, who are you going to sell it to? Now, you don't have to name the exact companies, but some idea of what types of companies would buy this. So you're effectively building a business in order to pay back the capital, and one of those ways of paying back that capital, particularly with equity, is to sell the business, or to merge the business, or to partially exit the business. So where are you going with this thing? So again, very important for capital to have that confidence and security. During funding, so we've got a nice presentation and some cash flow models and some business plans and some exits, and everyone's very happy, and you're sitting down and having conversations with investors on what the timing of that funding is and what they would expect to see you achieve during that funding stage. A lot of what we see is budgets and not forecast models. So a typical SME business plan would say, I need $500,000 for startup costs of the new division. I need a $2 million marketing budget because I need to pay X, Y, and Z this much. I need X amount for rent, and I'm going to expand to a new warehouse, and that's it. What this does is it constrains the business to committing to expenditure regardless of what your revenue model is. So when I talk about forecast model, we're talking about a model that actually reflects reality on a month-by-month basis. So when you have a forecast, if you have missed your sales target, you analyze why, you put the actual numbers in, and all your budgets will change on a monthly basis. So you may not now require those budgets. You might require certain budgets that are higher depending on how that revenue has changed or what you've achieved. Again, this builds trust during the financing phase where you are actually informing your investors how you are doing in reality compared to the plan that you have submitted. Again, I just spoke about this, avoiding reality in your forecasts every month. If the forecast for the year end has changed during that month because you have not achieved or you've overachieved budgets, put it in and inform during the process. We talked about analyzing why you haven't made your forecast again. Now this is actually very important because what investors want to see is transparency. What they want to see is that you understand the risks, and having understood those risks, you are aware that you may or may not achieve your results, and they want to know when you haven't achieved your results, and they want to know why you haven't achieved it. Now, this isn't a lot of SMEs and business owners and entrepreneurs, and I'm accused of doing this because I'm an entrepreneur and I own my own business, is beating myself up when I don't achieve my results or achieve my forecasts. The idea isn't to hold people accountable for why you haven't. The more important exercise here is to understand why you haven't, or why the business hasn't achieved its forecast. This could be due to several factors. It could be that the economy is down. It could be that your supplier didn't supply you your goods on time when you expected him to supply it mid-month. He's actually supplying at the end of the month, which had then affected your cash flows. So by analyzing the exact reasons why you haven't made your forecast, revenue, cost-wise, budget-wise, you're then able to take some timely corrective actions so that continually improves. And at the end of the day, as I'm sure you all know, I've been in this business for 25 years, and I have never, ever, ever, not once seen a business actually achieve its forecast, and that's the nature of forecasts, is to keep forecasting and get more and more accurate at it over time. So don't be afraid to do that. Post-funding. Now, this is, again, very important because once you receive the capital into your business, most people say, thank you very much, game over, goodbye, I'm going to go and be hugely successful now, thanks for the money, see you later. This is very, very important to keep your investors updated and your shareholders on changes regularly for several reasons. One is it builds confidence and trust. Two, it actually reduces your cost of capital, because when you go back to the market or back to that set of investors and say, hey guys, I've done really well and I've got a growth plan now and I need more cash. It will shorten the investment cycle. It will, in fact, reduce your cost of capital because you now have a successful track record with those investors for delivering the growth that you had promised, or for keeping them informed along the way on why you haven't and how you've then managed that business and managed that change and managed that growth. Therefore, the confidence factor for the investors will be higher, and they may be able, may be prepared this time to take a slightly lower return because they're more confident they are going to achieve the business plan. Again, what we see here is, we do some work with SMEs on investor reporting as well, post-capital raising. And the only time we would get a phone call, or a lot of the times, I don't want to be too tar everyone with the same brush, a lot of the times we will get a phone call from the company saying, hey guys, we need to have a shareholder meeting immediately. Why? Because we just did A, B, and C, and it's fantastic, and I want to tell the shareholders. And they haven't had a shareholder meeting for 9 months. And this kind of only tell the good news doesn't inspire confidence, it doesn't inspire trust, and it doesn't inspire confidence in the management. So what we tend to advise is to have regular quarterly meetings and presentations on how you have achieved against your original forecast that you had raised the capital on, inform them what the changes are, explain the reasons, show them that you understand your own business and you're managing your own business. So tell them the bad news along the way as well. And the last one is once you've raised the capital and the business is growing and doing great, again, this comes back to the exit plan. A lot of particularly entrepreneurs, SMEs, get very excited about their own business and they actually forget that their shareholders actually require a dividend, they require an exit, and at some point you have to pay them back, whether it's debt, whether it's equity, or whether it is any other form of finance. And monitoring that capital repayment of equity, dividends, and exit, again, is critically important because it not only inspires confidence, not only tells you that management are in control, but the investor then has some visibility on when he gets his money back. And again, this is key. So I think none of these are sort of the mantras, and I'm not trying to give lessons to anyone, but this is generally what we see throughout the financing cycle on SMEs and larger corporates on lessons that we've learned on how to manage that. So hopefully you've a couple of points have resonated and you've taken away some good ideas out of that. But these are our real-time thoughts on real-time clients. So please feel free to email me, contact us, have a chat after or during the event, and be happy to talk to any one of you about any of the points. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move on to the second part of our agenda, where experts will discuss strategies to build your finance function. To kickstart this very important discussion, please join us in welcoming Binod Shankar, Managing Director, Kaplan Genesis. Binod will lay down the basics by talking about the difference between cash flow, profit, and revenue.
Morning, everyone. Can you hear me? The lights are blinding. So, small story. I always like to start with a story here, right? And this is me on the right side. I know it doesn't look like me, but just believe it's me. Yeah, I was younger. I had a head of hair, and I was fairer as well. This is about 8 years ago. The left side is my friend Kareem. Let's give him a name, Kareem. It's a good name as any. And he called me because I teach finance. I'm an entrepreneur. And I said, Binod, I've got this company I want to invest in, right? And since you know finance, can you help me analyze the numbers? It's a good story, right? Because I said, yeah, fine, I'll help you analyze the numbers. So he showed me the financial statements. Okay? It looks like this. What do you notice here? Well, the numbers are circled in red, right? Revenue, 1.1 billion. Profit for the period, 1.142 billion. I know the numbers very well, by the way. Yeah. Is that a lot of money? Yes? Yes or no? Come on, guys. It is. It's more than my pay packet, so 1.142 billion is a big amount of money, right? Would you invest in the company? Yes or no? Yes, you would. I'm not hearing many voices. Come on, guys. Yes or no? Yes. Profits are good. Yes. The number is sexy. Gina said I should be sexy with numbers, so I'm trying to show you a sexy number here. And it is sexy. 1.142 billion is a hell of a lot of money. But what's missing here? What should I be asking? The one question I asked, which he didn't bother asking, was how much cash did the company make? How much cash do you think the company made in the same period? This, by the way, was for 2009, first 6 months of 2009. How much do you think? $1 billion, $500 million, $5 billion? Come on. How much cash from operations? How much? Sorry? 200,000. Oh, that's too low. Okay. So it lost 246 million dirhams. This is not confidential information. I'm not going to get deported from the UAE. Okay. I'm going to be here for the entire while, today at least. So what are we talking about? We're saying the profit is 1.142 billion. The cash flow is 246 million. What's happening here? What's happening here is a little of magic, a little bit of accounting standards, a little bit of, I won't say illegal stuff. Nothing illegal here. It has been audited. Okay? I shouldn't be saying that. It's not illegal at all. Everyone does it. So you have a company making profits, huge amount of profits, the same company, the same period, making bleeding money, literally bleeding money, $250 million dirhams every half year. Okay? Why is this happening? Well, I'm going to show you or talk you through a few important concepts. Okay? I'm not trying to make you into accountant, don't worry. Okay? I'm going to talk about debits and credits and bore the hell out of you. Okay? But I need to talk about something called accrual and cash. Cash is when you show your revenue in terms of cash inflows, and your expenses are based on cash outflows. It's fantastic. This is what your grocer, the guy who sells Coke and bananas and other stuff in your street corner, he follows this. He doesn't give a damn about international financial reporting standards or US GAAP or UK GAAP or Alaskan GAAP, pretty much. He just says, you know what, I sold so much, this is my revenue, and I got the cash. I spent so much, and that's my expense. The difference is my profit. In other words, entire profit is in cash. Fantastic. So why the hell do we not do that? Because some Italian guy, I think, called Luca Pacioli, if my memory serves me right, in the 17th century said, no, we must follow something called accrual, in Italian accent. This is my fake Italian accent, okay? And he said, you know what, revenue should be accounted when earned, not when cash is received. An expense should be accounted when incurred, not when cash is paid. Everything changed completely. Suddenly, we're looking at a different number completely. In other words, I can have a profit, which is 1.142 billion, yes, but I will have cash flows which is above or below, like Aldar's case. Well, there's a good reason why it is there. It's not just gobbledygook. It's not fraud. It's because you have to show accurate and timely reports. So you need to do that. So cash and accrual. But you know what? Most companies follow accrual basis. You should be following accrual basis. You must be following accrual basis. You don't know it, but you are. Okay? You're all accrual guys, yeah? So what is the issue here? Well, let's go back to financial statements. Income statement, balance sheet, cash flow. Forget balance sheet. I'm going to talk about the first and the last. Income statement and cash flow. Okay? What is income statement? It shows you performance. Someone comes to you and says, what is the performance of your company for the last half year, last quarter? What do you say? Look at my income statement. Look at my incomes, my revenues, look at my expenses. These are not necessarily in cash. It's a mix of cash and non-cash. And this is the critical thing you must understand. It's a blend of cash and non-cash. So when I say, for example, that I have profit of 1.142 billion, I don't mean to say I have made cash of 1.142 billion. I just mean to say that what? My revenue exceeds my cost by 1.142 billion. Extremely important point, right? Is it paper profits, like Aditya said before me? Yes, it is paper profits. Can you fudge it? You can't fudge it. That's how accounting scandals happen. Can you inflate it? Yes. I was CFO of a company. I didn't do this stuff. Don't look at me that way, okay? But I know how to do it. I know exactly how to turn the buttons on and off. And people do it all the time, especially public companies. That's your income statement. That's your profit, by the way, okay? But I want to talk about, look at the number here. So revenue for Aldar was 1.1 billion. Profit is 1.142 billion. How is that possible? You made more profit than your revenue, That's a red flag right there, right? How can you make more profit than your revenue? Because your profit should be what? Revenue minus expenses. So what Aldar did, by the way, you see this item here? Fair value gain on investment properties. They simply took the property given to them and just simply revalued it. And boom, and presto, at a flick of a button, your profits went up by 1.2 billion. Okay? This is how we do it. Okay? That's why CFOs are paid hell a lot of money. This kind of stuff. Yeah? Right. Forget profits now for the time being. Let's focus on cash. Cash is important, right? Okay? Now, cash is liquidity. And I wanted to think about just one item. Forget investing cash flows and financing cash flows. Think about operating cash flows. This is where you make your money from operations. When you get money from customers, it goes in here. When you pay your rent, it goes there. Salaries goes there. Taxes goes there. Okay? Other stuff is when you invest your money in plant and machinery, and other stuff is how you raise money from banks and share capital. But this is where Aldar was having minus 246 million. In other words, I hate to use this word, this is cash profit. Yeah? I should not use the words cash and profit. I'm going to contradict myself soon, are different concepts. But this is cash profit. It tells you the true measure of how much money you made in that period. Not your profit and loss account, not your P&L statement. Okay? So, what is liquidity telling you about? Look at Aldar. Again, I go back to the example, very well known. How much money did it lose? It lost $250 million dirhams. Where do you think the money was plugged in from? Where do you think the cash came in to plug the gap? From where? From financing activities. 11.9 billion dirhams of loans to plug the gap. How long do you think a company can survive by plugging a gap like this? How long? Can an SME survive for long? I don't think so. Did Aldar survive? Yes. Why did Aldar survive? Because it had a big fairy godmother called the Abu Dhabi government. You, ladies and gentlemen, don't have a fairy godmother or fairy godfather. You don't have a bank that will finance you. No one's going to give you money. Your friends and family relatives are sick and tired of you. No cash coming in. Okay? You don't have that. So Aldar simply went to Abu Dhabi government and raised about 12 billion dirhams in money, and all was sorted out and all was forgiven. You can't do that. So cash flows are important. Okay? So very important slide here. Cash versus profit. Right? Cash is not profit, and profit not cash. You need both, right? You have to be profitable and you have to make cash, right? It's dangerous to confuse cash with profit. Okay? And I tell you, cash, not profit, is a much better reflection of the financial health of a business. Isn't it? Can you pay salaries with profits? You can't. If someone came to you and said, by the way, I'm going to give your salaries for the next 5 years in profits, like, hold on, where's the cash? Okay, how do I pay my expenses, right? You can be cash rich and profit poor. Honestly speaking, I love this. You have a lot of cash, customers pay you advance money, but no profit. That's fine. I can live with that. But what you can't live with for long is when you are cash poor and profit rich, which is what Aldar did. Lots of inflated profits, lots of nice sexy numbers, but actual cash in the bank, negative. Okay? Very important. And all of us need to breathe and eat food. So I let's compare it very simply, right? Cash is like air. You need to have cash every second of your business. Profit is like food. Okay, we get into Ramadan, fasting season coming up. People survive for days, or hours rather, not days, sorry, without food. Okay? You can see yogis in Himalaya mountains surviving for weeks and years without food. You can't survive without air. Cash is air. Okay? And that's pretty much the presentation, I think. But hold on, I've got more time. So what do we talk about? When I was a child, no, sorry, let's go there. So the point I'm trying to make is, yes, cash is important, profit is also important. So how do you manage this? How do you manage your cash? Yeah? Aditya talked about it. Talal Tukan, who's going to come up after me, see, I'm actually giving you a heads up, Talal. I'm building you up for now, superstar, yeah? Talal is going to talk about working capital management. I'm going to touch briefly on working capital management, just briefly. I don't want to steal your thunder, Talal, yeah? Because how do you make your cash? Well, there are three elements. Your inventory is basically what you buy and hold before you sell it. You don't want to get stuck with slow-moving inventory. Do we agree on that? Yes? Yeah? You don't want that. Make sure you have fast-moving inventory. Make sure you don't invest all your cash in precious inventory lying in your warehouse, earning you zilch, for which you have taken a bank loan and you're paying through your nose. By the way, do you know how much banks charge for SME loans in the UAE? So bankers sitting out here, so I should be very careful what I say, okay? Yeah, Tash, I can see you. How much do bankers charge for SME loans? A lot, I know, but how much is a lot? Sorry? Yeah, 26%. Thank you. 26%, going up to 32%. Okay, I don't know who can afford it. Unless you're in some very illegal business, which I don't want to know about, you can't afford this stuff. Okay, so inventory, optimize it. I don't say minimize. I use the word optimize, by the way. Optimize means balance it. Why? Because if you have too little inventory, stock out. Customers come to you, you can't sell. You have too much inventory, your money is lying idle, not earning anything. That's the first one. The first element of working capital management, inventory. Second is your receivables. What's receivables? Aditya made a very good point, right? People try to get money early from customers and to get credit from suppliers. It's not a very feasible model, is it? So you have to sell for credit. Okay? There's money lying in the market, not paid to you. So why does it happen? So how do you reduce that? Well, reduce credit period. Do aging analysis. Okay? But interestingly, I was doing a conversation with one of my friends who is an SME entrepreneur. You know the number one reason why money is not collected from your customers on time? Can you imagine? Sorry? Not following up is up there. But the other reason, the top reason, is absurd. Thank you. Forgot to invoice. Have you forgotten to invoice by any chance? No. Forgot to invoice. It's as simple as that. It's not high tech. You deliver the service, the customer loved it, but you simply forgot to invoice. Is the customer going to call you up and say, by the way, I forgot to pay you, I want to pay you now, you know? Not in Dubai, by the way, yeah, at least, yeah. They park their car in Dubai airport and they're gone. Used to be, okay? So that's one issue here, receivables, okay? The third one is payables, okay? How many times have you told your supplier, the check is in the post, I will transfer it to you after Ramadan, inshallah, okay? Or after my marriage anniversary, or after my divorce anniversary, or after my grandmother's funeral. Whatever it is, you always keep delaying payables. Don't delay too much, because then you have problem with supplier. But make sure you take advantage of the credit period from supplier. Yeah? That's the whole thing here, yeah? So, optimize. The keyword is not reduce. The keyword is not maximize. It is optimize. Optimize what? Well, optimize the 3 or 4 elements of working capital, which again, Talal will talk about later. First is inventory. Make sure you optimize this. Receivables, don't have too much outstanding from the market. Payables, make sure you take advantage of credit from suppliers, and have some cash to manage your expenses. Yeah? I did some research. Do you know, for example, that 2/3 of business, this is from the US, by the way, I'm sure it's probably valid in the Middle East and GCC as well. 2/3 of business survive 2 years in business. Half of all businesses survive 5 years. 1/3 will survive 10 years. Okay? I'm hoping that there's a much bigger survival rate over here, thanks to SME Advisor and Gina, but let's see. We should do a survey after a few years, yeah? And see how it goes. Yeah? But you know why this happens? One major reason why this, what you call, survival of the fittest happens, why people just disappear, is because of cash. 82% of businesses fail because of cash flow problems. You don't get enough cash in hand, you give too much credit to customers, you pay in advance suppliers, you're just not making enough cash. Okay? Right? So what's the end piece? You know? Gina said, you know what? Leave the speech or presentation with 3 things that will stick in their minds. Because they will forget you. You're not interesting at all, Binod. You're not. Let's face it. You're old, you're bald, you're not sexy. So just leave them with something that really hits them, and they'll never forget you for the rest of their life, or the rest of the day. Let's put it this way. Yeah. So 3 things. So Einstein had this equation, E is equal to mc squared, blah, blah, blah. I have my 3 equations. Okay? Honestly, it's not mine. I ripped it off. Okay? But it's my adaptation. Okay? So I say, you know what? Revenue is vanity. What's vanity? When Gina goes to people and says, I'm from SME Advisor, first thing is, how big are you? She doesn't mention employees. She doesn't mention profit. She'll mention what? Revenue. That's your size, right? Size matters. So it's all about revenue. 1 billion, 2 billion, 5 billion. But revenue can be faked. You can have fake invoices, fake customers. I can tell lots of stories of how companies fake revenue, right? I used to be an accountant, auditor in my previous life. I know all about the tricks of the trade. Okay? So it can be faked. But that's not cash. That's not cash either. It's just revenue. It's the top line. Okay? So what's more important than revenue, you think? Any ideas? What's more important? Profit? Don't you need to make a profit? Yes, you need to make a profit. So revenue minus expense is profit. So I say profit is, well, you know what? It's sanity. It's more sensible than revenues, right? Because revenue, you can have 5 billion of revenue, you spend a lot of money, you make a loss. What's the point of running the business? You might as well shut it down and go hiking or skiing or whatever you want to do. So it must be you must have revenue, and you must be profitable. isn't it? But you know what? I like to quote have you watched the movie Wall Street? I'm sure everyone has. Not the 2010 version, the 1987 version. I'm that old, by the way. Don't ask me my age, but I'm that old. 1987, Michael Douglas, Gordon Gekko. Remember? He used the word greed. I won't use the word greed here. Wrong time, wrong place. I'm going to substitute that with cash. Okay? He said what? Cash is good. Actually, I would say cash is great. Cash is great. Cash is right. Cash works. Cash, to me, captures the essence of the performance of a business. Okay? Cash cuts through, cash clarifies. And cash, ladies and gentlemen, is what's going to save and grow your business. In other words, cash is reality. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker gets to the absolute core of finance and talks about a simple yet critical area of your business, cash flow. Can't wait to hear what he has to say? Well, let's find out. Talal Toukan, VP, Head of Research and Advisory, Al Rams Capital.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you today. And thanks, Bennett. He made it much easier for me to explain what we're going to talk about. Essentially, what I'm going to speak to you about is the essentials of cash flows, or more accurately, the essentials of how cash flies. Luckily, I have some common grounds with also George, talking about the timing of getting your financing, and then we take it to the next level. Starting from here, it's just only the key takeaways. We're not going to start with there. The idea is that this is the part where we talk about now the traditional cash flow statement is divided into 3 sections. One, which is the most important part, is the operation cash flows, or net cash flows from operations. And then that is your own business. Now, it's fine if you have negative cash flows for a while, but for business viability, it's not healthy at all to have negative operating cash flows. And what we mean by operating cash flows, I will walk you through immediately. Then you have the financing cash flows, which is how you can cover the gap, as Bennett pointed to. The idea is, we know that cash flows are cash inflows and cash outflows. But when it comes to SMEs, it is actually the lifeblood of the economy. Why? From the Ministry of Economy, statistics show that you have like more than 350,000 SMEs in town, and they represent approximately 86% of the private sector's workforce and almost 60% of the GDP. And that is growing and should grow further. That's why cash flow is not an accounting number or as a cash balance that is normal for SMEs. It's the lifeblood, in my opinion. What do we mean by cash conversion cycle, and why I want to tailor an emphasis on that in specific is because we have it all on the back of our mind. All entrepreneurs and business managers do have it in the back of our mind. It's a simple cycle. The cycle is that we know, now not all businesses have inventory, but the idea is we know that you buy your goods or you establish your services, then you pay your suppliers, you store if you have an inventory, then you sell and collect your cash. In other words, it's acquisition of inventory for companies in the manufacturing, for example, and then you store it, sell it, then you collect the cash. And by the way, if you look at the major successful stories in the SMEs, and some of them graduated to the bigger corporates, is when it comes to optimizing the cash collection, the cash process or cash system. If you looked at troubled companies before, they either stacked a lot of inventory, like if you've seen the American Apparel and the story behind the inventory, it could kill the business, or the inability to collect your cash, which if you overcome it, you become even bigger and bigger, and we've seen Souq.com, for example, and other names also like Kareem and other businesses. And the secret is behind digitizing your payment systems. You sell your products, and even Fisher, you pay your products immediately by a credit card, you collect your cash. But the most troubled companies within the SME, it's actually because of, it's inherited from bigger companies. Bigger companies don't pay quickly to smaller businesses. I will walk you through a quick example. It's metaphoric, chasing a $100 company with a simple balance sheet. We just started the business, you have $100, and that's your capital. Under normal scenario, assuming that you have an average collection period, or you collect your cash every 180 days, the storage or the stock you have remains for 180 days, and you pay your suppliers within 180 days. And if you sold the $100 business for 110, that means the $10 profit, right? Or a profit margin of 10%. Reverse engineering the numbers on your balance sheet will come out with the following items, which is very simple. Cash will be 55 receivables, 50 inventory, and on the other hand, accounts payable 50, and your total balance sheet 160, which is your $10 of profit, and 50 is a short-term financing from accounts payable. What does that mean? It means you have a cash and inventory to invest in the next cycle. And that I will come to the point where George raised when it comes to failing, and 90% of the business fail at some point in the reinvestment process, is you have $105, which means next year, assuming you have the same profit margin, you will have $11 or 10%, or 11%. Now from 10% to 11% return on initial investment. Now what happens, and what happened before? We've seen, from a banking point of view, we've seen how the SMEs fell into the trap of liquidity. And I think I'm touching on the pain here. Why? Because the acceleration and deceleration of your cash conversion cycle can be deadly. How can we say that? Now, of course, before going there, the powerful digital platforms can make it faster. Business-to-business bartering, I believe in digitizing operations, but I don't believe in digitizing your relationships. And unfortunately, during the last 15 years, shifting the personal touch in terms of relationships in person and not through social media is affecting the cash conversion cycle within the SME sector. Crowdfunding, factoring and invoice financing, credit scoring are all available, but there is a knowledge gap as far as we observe between the usage of these products and also the ability to spread awareness from major providers, especially banks and financial institutions. They only lend you when your cash conversion cycle is intact and when you don't need it. Now, the second, an accelerated cash conversion cycle, if you employ technology, if you were able, theoretically speaking, to speed up your cash collection period, to make your inventory move faster, and to keep your accounts payable intact, which is the days in accounts payable, you pay within the same terms. As simple as that. Your balance sheet will never change in terms of size, but the allocation of cash, you have $108 cash, assuming 50% drop in the collection period and in the days in inventory. And what does that mean? That means that you will have, for the next accounting period or next fiscal period, around $133 cash available for reinvestment. Simply said, that's next year profit of $13. Now you were able, by enhancing your cash conversion cycle, enhancing your profitability from 11% to 13%, or actually 10% initially to 13%. And that's a big jump, and it's metaphorically speaking, but for companies, if you go for companies that now have powerful digital platforms and applications to pay, and with the same businesses without the same digital platforms, you will find out that the cycle affects between 5 to 7% of their next period expected return. Now, the other side of the story is when you have their cash conversion cycle decelerated, which is what we've seen during the last couple of years because of the general economic situation inflationary pressure, collection inefficiencies, stiff competition, and also one more important aspect that I think we're not yet ready is the value-added tax, which in our opinion, it's a small percentage, but it will affect your cash conversion cycle, and that's why you have to be prepared beforehand. Taking the same example with an average collection period pumped up to 270 days, inventory days, 270 days, while the supplies, the average payment period remained the same. Look at how detrimental this slower cycle will be on the balance sheet. The balance sheet will not show anything. You still have done $160 and you still have made profits of $10. Just seconding what Bennett told you, is that revenues on profits for the period, which is looking backwards, remains the same. In each scenario, you did $10, but now the challenge is in the coming period. You will only have $78 available to reinvest next year or during the next period. And that means your return on investment will simply drop from 10 or 11 or $13 to $8. And that takes me to the next point, which is the challenges happen, is that you have less liquidity and you have less capability to have further liquidity in the next period. When you have enough profitability, it's ironic, but it's the reality of business. Banks chase after businesses that are successful, while they don't really need the cash at this point. But the idea is for businesses to avoid a fatal mistake is to have the cash when you really have the capability to have it, not when you really need it. So it needs pure planning. So you have only $8. And this is the last slide, which is just only to compare and what usually happens. Last year and the year before in the UAE, we had a decelerated cycle. And businesses did make either losses or small profits in a way that businesses had hiccups. You needed some cash, even if you did profits. But banks with higher effective cost of borrowing, giving the SMEs hard times to find the funding. And that's when you actually need it. And businesses try to go for equity at that point, while the business is not really attractive, but it could probably be the right time. However, when you have a normal cycle and accelerated cycle, banks are happy, so they will borrow you, but also equity investors will be approaching you. When it is the right time to go for financing, you might be approached by equity investors, you might be taken over, you could be enticed by the valuations offered, while the right time is to have debt when you're in a good condition, because the right mix of capital structure might actually maximize your return on equity. We should always be monitoring the spread between what you make in terms of money and the effective cost of borrowing. So that's it. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. And the presentation ends here. Please feel free to reach out to me for any further details. And I'm more than happy and open to receive any questions. Thank you very much.
The financial health of your business relies on a great extent to how well you manage your liabilities and debts. Yes, it's that one area that no one wants to talk about, and every finance leader dreads to address. Effectively managing debts, we all know too well, is something you can't ignore. We are delighted to welcome next CA Nizad Dugard, Managing Partner, Nime Management Consultants, to address this critical subject.
Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you for having me here, the team from CPI. Talal ended it at an absolute right note for me, because he spoke about a decelerated cash cycle where banks are wary to extend loans and stuff. So before I start speaking, just to know the audience better, how many bankers in the room? How many bankers in the room? Okay, we have few. That's great. And how many corporates or business houses who avail credit facilities from banks, or who have availed in the past or are planning to avail credit facilities from banks? Just to understand. Okay, so we have a mix of both. What I'm going to try and do is, I have exactly like a five slides, yeah, but I'm just going to share a few of my thoughts, which are very simple, and what I think should be good pointers for businesses when you are looking to have relationships with banks. So we all know these basic requirements, right? You need audited balance sheets, you need a track record in the business, you need to have a good market check and stuff. But when you are going through a difficult cycle, you need to stand out as a business. Does everyone agree? Yeah, because as Talal mentioned, during the good cycle, it's easier to avail debt and grow your business. But when you're going through a phase like corporates and companies went through in the recent past, banks are looking for businesses which can stand out. Yeah? So you need to be able to demonstrate how your business model actually is strong enough to sustain this cycle. So based on our experience, when we've interacted with a few relationship managers across, these are just basic pointers. I think these three things have become very critical right now in the market. How committed are the promoters in the country? Because we all know of so many default and skip cases that the banks went through. So with the corporates, what is the on-ground business model? How strong is the business model locally within the country? And this is especially true when it comes to SME businesses. And a clean banking track record. So you have your Etisalat Credit Bureau or your central bank reports, which the banks have access to look at what kind of businesses they can lend to. Now, this is just the basic. Now, what I want to share with you are a few pointers on managing your bank debt. Okay, so before we start, what do you think happened to this guy? What does this expression say? Okay, he's worried about his heavy charges, so it's a worrisome expression. Please, sorry? Oh, he doesn't have cash. So that's also a possibility. Let's hear some thoughts, yeah, let's make it a little more interactive, because when I go ahead, I'm sure there'll be more questions. His money is out of sight, it is sitting on his head, he can't see it, that's valid. Sorry? Oh, it's waiting for him at home, okay. Oh, okay, that's trending these days. That's possible. That's a very valid point. He might be losing what he's earning and he's worried about that. So I think everyone agrees that he's worried. I was once giving a presentation where the seating was theater style, yeah? So someone from the back row actually said he just saw his wife's credit card bill. So no offense meant, it was just one of the comments that I heard. So yeah, I think in today's times, you have to be very careful, both the finance managers and the promoters, when managing your debts, because you don't want to be over-leveraged in a slow business environment. So yes, there are chances of getting worried. My first point is the interest cost. The speaker before also mentioned about this. SMEs pay a very high interest cost. What I like to say is that this interest cost is a direct perception of the risk that the bank faces. The pricing that the bank charges is based on their perception of the risk. Now, does the perception differ from bank to bank? Yes? Everyone agrees that it will differ from bank to bank? Yeah? So you will find in a lot of cases an exact same business getting differential pricing from two different banks in a country. Make sense? Yeah, very simple, but it's profound. I'll give you a very classic example. I had a client who owned 2 buildings in Ajman in the Northern Emirates. Yeah? He was trying to raise finance. He goes to Bank A. Bank A says, property in Ajman, we're not very comfortable. We'll give you 50% of the value of the property at a, say just for an example, at a 7% interest. Yeah? He goes to Bank B. Bank B says, property in Ajman, no problem. You get 70% of the value of the property at 6%. Does it make sense to us as business owners? Those who have not dealt with bank debts or not had the experience before, it doesn't. But it's the perception of the risk which matters. So knowing what the bank's appetite is and knowing what the banks prefer in the current market environment would also help you to understand the kind of interest cost that you're going to pay and also the kind of bank that you would like to work with. Am I making sense? Yeah, I'll take you through a few more examples. So basically what I'm saying is selecting the bank which understands your business model and more importantly has the appetite for that kind of a business model. Yeah? Because especially if you look at the SME sector, not all banks would have appetite for the same kind of a business. So if you look at hospitality, F&B, retail kind of business, banks are more favorable to it. But if you want to construct a building or a developer is looking to finance, maybe not all banks are, I'm not saying no one will do it, but maybe not all are favorable to it. So you need to identify institutions and look out and discuss with people to find out what's the appetite so you're better placed. Similarly for Africa, I mean, I look at a lot of companies, even in the SME sector, who trade a lot with Africa over here. Yeah? But the African risk appetite within the banks could be low. One of the most global banks does not have a single branch in Africa, so they may not be able to take risk on that. Yeah? So how you can manage or optimize your interest cost, probably reduce is not the right word, it should have been optimize, is you discuss and find out and approach a bank which understands your business model and has the appetite for that business model. Yeah, that's the key takeaway that I had to share from this slide. Going ahead, whenever you're talking to banks, the way you structure your bank facility is equally important, right? So most of the banks here would charge a cash margin for you on your facilities. So you need to understand what is the optimum level of cash margin that you need to pay, because whatever you can reduce on your cash margins, it's good for the business. So if as an entrepreneur you've invested in property here, you make a decent rental return on that property, you might consider giving that property as a collateral instead of keeping a cash margin with the bank. Does that make sense? Because you're getting, so I'm not advocating you to buy property and then put it with the banks, yeah? I'm going the reverse way. I'm saying you've already made a decision to have a property here. Then instead of putting a fixed deposit with the bank, you could also consider putting that property up as a collateral. And in fact, I know a lot of banks here would actually like to have a property as a collateral while granting credit facilities. So it helps you get better return on your money, basically. Who is this gentleman in the pic? Any guesses? Sorry? Richard Branson, okay, that's the first time I've heard this one. Oh, okay, I'll leave that one out. Donald Trump. He's actually your finance manager or your chief accountant. Yeah, by nature, they're very boring people, you might say. But they need to have a life. They need to be on the beach. They need to have some holidays. And having too many bank accounts or bank facilities to deal with is not good for your business, not healthy for the business, and not good for your finance manager's life as well. The third one is you can decide the priority, yeah? But you need to get the finance manager alive. I'll tell you an example. I have seen corporates here with a turnover of 50 to 60 million dirhams having 7 to 8 bank loans. It becomes very difficult to manage, and despite the best of intentions, the promoters could end up making mistake in managing those 7 to 8 relationships or 9 relationships. It's not healthy for the business to have those kind of relationships for that size of the business. Also, the reverse is true as well, yeah? Maybe just having one bank in your portfolio is risky as well, yeah? You may end up having a concentration risk, just as you speak about your customers' diversification and having a spread of customers. So again, what is the optimum number of banking relationships that you want to have? You need to think about that, yeah? But going out and taking 8 or 9 banks for a certain size of business, not at all a good idea. Usage of funds for the purpose that it was borrowed. I'm sure everyone in the room would agree that you should not borrow short-term money and invest it in a long-term asset, correct? How many of you have seen the reverse affecting a business? Someone takes a term loan and then uses it for his working capital, or a business loan kind of a product which is available in the market. Do you think that can affect your business? A typical working capital facility is available on a rotating basis, right? You use the working capital facility for 120, 180 days, you settle it with the bank, and you draw down the full amount again. Making sense? Yeah? But when you take a term loan and start using it for your working capital, or a business loan which is 48 months or 36 months, and start using it, at the end of the second year, when you've repaid half of your loan, you will suddenly realize that that working capital has gone out of the system because you've gone and settled the bank. Hello? No? Or yes? At the end of the second year, I'll repeat this. At the end of the second year, you will suddenly realize that 50% of the capital which was available to you to use in your business has been settled and repaid to the banks. Yeah? So suddenly you will feel that you're short of working capital. And typically what happened also in this market in the last few years, because that went out, you borrowed from another bank now to settle this. Then you borrowed from a third bank to settle this. And it becomes a cycle. And you get into a trap. Yeah? So yes, don't use short-term money and invest in a long-term asset like a property or a real estate or whatever. But at the same time, the reverse is also true, which many a times might get skipped from your notice because it's easy money available and you might use it for your business. But then if you're borrowing for a certain period, make sure that you're able to return that money and still survive. Yeah? Because your business gets used to a certain working capital level. Talal pointed out very efficiently that you had $73 and $5 or $78 left in your cash flow to reinvest. Your business gets used to that cash flow cycle. And when you start repaying the term loan installments, you may get stuck. So when you speak to your banks for facilities, you also need to structure the right product that you are trying to avail of. And discussing with the banks will help you a lot because they will be able to suggest you what product suits your business. Yeah? But always discuss and find out how the product works. So take an example of a service industry, yeah? Whether it is IT or advertising or logistics, service providers. What's the working capital for a service provider? Where does his money go? Salaries and rent, yeah? predominantly salaries if you look at any IT company. So what they do is they provide a service in a month, they pay off the salaries, they bill the customer, and he will pay after 30 or 60 days. So the best possible product for them is to discount their customer's invoice. That's the only way it's going to work. He cannot go and take a LC or a TR kind of a facility. It's not going to be of any use for him. Yeah? So you need to pay attention to how you structure and use the right products for your business. Again, Yusan's days is the working capital cycle. The two speakers before me have spoken about it in detail. But you need to understand what is your business cycle, how much are your receivable days, your inventory, and you need to ensure that you have the right number of days available from the bank to repay the money. Yeah? Stretching it too tight is not good, and utilizing the money for an extended period when you don't need it is also not good, because you may end up using the money for some other reason other than the purpose for which it was borrowed. That's what I had mentioned earlier as well. Window dressing of balance sheet. It's an interesting word. I think one of the speakers mentioned that briefly. When you do not have a highly regulated environment, it's very easy to do that. But does that help you in the long run? 90% of the cases that I have seen, it has never helped anyone in the long run. Because you're just trying to show to a bank that I have this much of revenue, this much of profit, this much of assets, which you actually don't have. And then you're trying to borrow based on that. So a company might be able to do that and take the loan, but then you will not be able to repay it on time. Yeah? When the going is good, the accelerated cash cycle, you might be able to manage this, but the problem will arise when you look at a slowdown. Yeah? So I don't think, and we're getting into a tax regime next year, so in any case, this will become very, very tricky. Last point, not a very significant point, but very important as well for people to understand that as your business grows, you need to make sure that your auditors are approved by the banks that you're working with. Yeah, because banks generally tend to have, I don't know whether I should call it a list of auditors or approved auditors or what, but yes, they have preference for certain, I would say let's not put it the preference, but certain auditors they might not accept. Let's put it this way. Yeah? So at certain stage when your business is growing and your number of relationships with the banks are growing, you might want to look at this point and have, again, the best thing is have a conversation with your bankers, understand that am I on the right track, are these auditors okay in your list as per your recommendation and stuff. Yeah? So these were just a few points that I had in mind in terms of what you are trying to do when you're looking to raise bank finance. Yeah, you need to keep calm when you're raising finance. I think that's the most critical point. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to take if there are any questions.
With increasing costs and intensifying markets, your business really needs to make the transition from a CAPEX to an OPEX model. But it doesn't have to be as complicated as it sounds. Our next expert is someone who can simplify the process for you. Please join us in calling on stage Sudip Ghosh, Chief Financial Officer, AKI Group.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There's some issue because the talk that I'm going to have is about budget, effective planning whilst budgeting. Anyway, I'm going to talk about something which is very close to my heart. Implementation of this has proved extremely beneficial and efficient in my previous workplaces. I'm not here to preach or teach anything. What I would like to do is share my personal experience with you, and I hope that some of what I say will create a positive impact on some of you in some way. What I'm going to talk about today is the modern day budget, its measurement techniques, and its impact. If you would listen to my points, and probably some of you feel that you're already incorporating this in your present day business. In that case, I will say fabulous. I wholeheartedly applaud that, and I can vouch for the fact that you're on the right track. However, if you're not implementing it, please have a listen and maybe consider this implementation, because I can assure you that there will be an immediate impact in the improvement of your efficiencies. Traditionally, budget has always been a finance domain. When I joined the workforce 20 plus years ago, financial budgeting, the annual financial budgeting was a dirty exercise which used to be taken care by the finance and accounts team, with very little factual input from the sales and operations team. As a result, the budget was a purely number-driven exercise based on historical range of data, some general factors of growth being built in, and subsequently just a one-dimensional budget which is purely financial from all aspects. Once the budget was approved by the senior management, then the required planning was worked upon in order to deliver the budget. So that meant that all sorts of strategic and tactical plans were put into place once the budget was finalized. Invariably, there were disgruntlement about the budget numbers, because it's been created by the finance team, and the delivery of or the expectations of meeting the numbers were with somebody else. If there were real problems in meeting those numbers, the blame was well and squarely put on the finance team's shoulder. If I had a $10 bill, every time that I heard that it's the unrealistic budget which was the creation of this inefficient finance team, I would be a multimillionaire by now. In fact, some of those complaints were actually justified, because the budgets tended to be unrealistic. And unrealistic budget is not just detrimental for the sales and operations, it's detrimental for the entire company. I mean, imagine creation and spending for the infrastructure that is required for an unrealistic budget, and then suddenly realize that, oops, we are nowhere close to achieving these numbers. Hence, I had always pondered about how can we work towards a budget which has the buy-in of people from all around the company, and therefore everybody is working towards the achievement of that with a synergistic effect. The answer to that problem was actually quite simple. The budget planning has to cease to be a finance activity alone and has to be a collaborative effort. Do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that the budget responsibility has to move away from finance. But finance's responsibility now is to deliver a budget which is built in conjunction with all stakeholders, and therefore a budget which has the best chance to succeed. It is also the finance responsibility to measure the budget, the competence of the budget, and give a heads up to the management about the returns that this budget is going to give or generate for the company. What does this mean? It means that now the budget creation has to get distributed over a lot of people. Therefore, the budget input activity has to be broken down over a number of activities for which each activity has an activity owner. For example, the sales and margin input will remain the domain of the sales and operations team. They will have to put in numbers that are challenging, that they conform to the top management directive, and at the same time reflective of the market situation and the business scenarios. Once they present these numbers with conviction and with justification and get them approved, after that, the delivery of those numbers should be pretty straightforward for them. There can always be some exigent contingencies which can affect the delivery of these numbers, but by and large, the hitting of the budget numbers should not be a problem. In similar veins, the marketing team should be responsible for the plotting of the selling and marketing overheads. The HR team should guide the input of HR-related costs, and so on and so forth. In this process, we will see that the ad hoc number input is not going to be easy. And therefore, the planning for the budget period will be starting now in order to get the real numbers. And this is what you want. You don't want the business to start planning in the next budget period once the numbers have been finalized. You want them to have a plan ready and which simply needs to get executed once the budget period starts. There's no need to set out the blueprint once you're entered the new budget year. The blueprint is already with you. All it may require are a few tweaks. Now, therefore, finance has to create this budget model which has these attributes. A budget can be Excel-based, it can be a moderate budget tool which is brought off the shelf, or it can be an elaborate budget software which is customized to the company's requirement. Whatever is the case, the planning needs to be made simpler for the activity owners. Therefore, the data that is provided for the planning purpose has to have the historical data, the trend analysis, the seasonality information. In short, all the key information that would be required for an effective planning. Even the data entry into the budget software or Excel, whichever is the preferable mode, has to be made easy for the user. For example, if somebody wants to change the, say, sales numbers for a certain period by a percentage, they should be able to just select it, click on the percentage, and it should change. If somebody wants to add an head count, all they need to do is select the position, select the month of the additional head count, and based on the HR guided input, all the relevant HR costs should get plotted. There are literally n number of possibilities that is possible now with the present day budget situation, and especially with the budget software that is available, the possibilities are literally endless. Now comes the measurement criteria. Now, traditionally, again, most of the times budget has been evaluated on the revenue and the net profit basis. But there are many other elements that are actual measurement criteria for the budget. But the one that I believe is most effective is the return on capital employed basis, the ROCE method. I am not belittling the other parameters, they're all important, but I think using ROCE effectively is a very good indicator of how well the company is performing and how the value is getting added towards the shareholders or the owners of the company. The beauty of ROCE measurement is that if you have a good mechanism by which the relevant costs of the different components of the company are attributable and identified, then the ROCE can be calculated at various levels. For example, the ROCE need not be calculated only at the company level. The ROCE actually can be calculated at division level, product line level, customer level, agency level. In fact, once the habit of measurement by ROCE is well entrenched, then it is possible even during the planning phase to go down into the granular level and see which are your inefficient areas. So therefore, if you do an ROCE calculation while you're planning, it might throw out to you that this product line is inefficient, or this customer is inefficient, or this particular agency is inefficient. Therefore, even at the planning stage, you are capable of taking the right measures in order to fix those inefficient areas, or if need be, drop those inefficient areas in order to make the company more profitable and more efficient. In conclusion, I will try and summarize my talk in a few sentences. Budget needs to cease to be a one-dimensional model. It has to be multidimensional with input from various parts of the company, various departments of the company, and the ownership of delivering the budget has to be on everybody who's working for the company, which can only create a synergy effect. Budget has to be done in a systematic manner on a well-designed tool. The tool can be Excel-based or a software-based, that's up to the company. And budget should be measurable, not only from a revenue and net profit point of view, but also from an efficiency and returns perspective. Once these are in place, we will find that a very effective, well-planned, and realistic budget is being created, and with which the roadmap to success will already be well navigated. I'm ready to take on any questions. I'll be hanging around, so if you want to catch up sometime later, it's fine. I wish you all a very good day. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a break for 30 minutes. We will be commencing the next session on time, so kindly return to the room as soon as the next announcement is made. Please enjoy coffee and refreshments in the networking area.
No. Mine's it's
So he's first.
Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way to your seats. The event is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way to your seats. The event is about to begin.
hear me now. Thank you for most of you coming back from coffee break. So what I'm going to do today is quickly talk through some of the alternative financing products that are around at the moment and primarily focus on digital platforms. So disruption is something that's happening the world over, be it in travel, be it in medicine, be it in healthcare. Financial services are being disrupted as well, which is generally good news for most people out there. That means basically investors can get better returns or get access to returns that they couldn't get before, and also means that businesses have a wider choice of solutions as well with wider data as well. Now, my understanding is the next the panel is going to be on is on big data and data itself. And what we do at Beehive and a lot of other financing platforms like us is use that data to basically assess people in a different way. So I hope you can see that. Effectively, what I'm going to really focus on are two types of platforms. So I think most people out here will have heard of crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is effectively you, the crowd, funding something. Now that could be through someone like internationally like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, where effectively you are basically putting money into a product that's yet to be launched yet. Or it could be through other systems. Eureka here is one of the better well-known ones, where you are personally investing into businesses. And ultimately, what equity crowdfunding platforms are trying to do is disrupt investment banking, venture capitalists, private equity, effectively by allowing the crowd access to deals they would not normally have access to. Debt is exactly the same. So debt crowdfunding, or peer-to-peer, as it's known. There are a few players here in the Middle East. Beehive ourselves, we set up about 2.5 years ago. In addition, you've got Invoice Bazaar, which looks much more at the invoice side of things. And then there's Liwa, which is a Jordanian-based website, but looking at opening up here as well. And really what they kind of focus on are a number of things. So you can see what the debt side is focusing on is loans and trade finance, and those are the two key areas, really. And then if you look at the equity side, effectively it's either pure crowdfunding or it's access to angels. So Venture Souk are a very good business. All of these really are aimed at either early stage or SMEs. Now, when I say SMEs is a very, very, very wide range, and can encapsulate businesses really from a revenue of 500,000 dirhams per annum, the whole way up to around about 200 million dirhams per annum. Most of the things we're focusing on here are businesses sub 100 million dirhams revenue, but still pretty big. That's what, $30 million? That's actually quite a sizable business. This is a slide just to give you some sort of idea of how crowdfunding and debt platforms can take over. This is basically an American scene, and this slide is about 3 years old as well, so now there are a lot more out there. But this shows how peer-to-peer and debt funding, which is only about 12 years old, has grown into a huge phenomena. If you look at the UK, Funding Circle is probably the best known one from the UK. That is now the third biggest lender in the UK to SMEs. 5p of every £1, so 5% of every single pound that gets lent out in the UK is now over Funding Circle. It's a phenomenal stat, a business that's only 6 years old, and so really can do very, very large disruption. We ourselves, what do? Effectively, we do not lend to startups, we lend to businesses which are at least 2 years old, but these are credit-worthy businesses. And really what we're trying to do is connect you, the crowd, with businesses. You probably all have some money that's sitting idle in a bank account, earning no interest. Okay? The SMEs, as we've heard earlier today, struggle to get finance. The average rate that we generally see is around about 20% per annum, which is an extraordinarily high interest rate. Banks are borrowing at 1%. So why on earth is it they're making 19% to get it out? Now, admittedly, that's not all profit. There's inefficient costs, there are losses, and there is profit as well. But a 19% differential between the cost of borrowing and the cost of lending out to a business. You, the crowd, I expect would be pretty happy with a 10% return per annum. Therefore, actually, once you take a platform's cut out of it, the business can borrow around about 12%. And that's 12% reducing, which if you're looking at a flat rate, that's about 7%. So remarkably cheap for credit-worthy businesses. We ourselves, we launched in November 14, and we've done about $25 million of financing on 200 requests, and we're also regulated. But I don't want to stress too much about us ourselves. I want to talk more about generally what's going on with platforms such as ours. These are the figures for Beehive, but to be honest, any other platform will give you very, very, very similar ideas. What's the benefit as a business? The benefit as a business is effectively it's going to be cheaper here. Now, that's one of the key things. So you'll find that financing through us is around about 30%. That's 30% cheaper than a bank. How do we do it, and how do platforms like us do it? We take data, basically, and we cut the market. Banks are very good, and banks are here to stay. So don't, if your bankers here in the room, don't worry, you are going to have a job here, not for life, but definitely jobs for a long time to come. But what banks are very good at is lending to individuals, and they're very good at lending to big business. The SME basically gets squeezed in the middle, and the reason they get squeezed is primarily because they're seen as one big homogenous group. In reality, all SMEs, like all businesses, are different. What we focus on, and a lot of businesses like us will focus on, are businesses which are generally people businesses. So these aren't businesses with big assets that a bank can take security over, but these are very strong credit-worthy businesses. Could be in recruitment, could be in tech, could be in media, could be in PR, could be F&B, a whole load of industries which don't have big assets, but actually have very, very, very strong cash flows and great contracts underneath them as well. Secondly, platforms like us can turn things around very quickly. So we have an SLA where we'll turn a credit assessment around in 3 days. In reality, actually, we can do it in 24 hours. That's a very, very quick turnaround. And then on top of that is access. So a lot of this comes down to the ability to get finance in the first place, and certainly the ability to get it at a rate which means it's economically viable for you as a business. There's also a wider piece. We have a great ecosystem. If you, the investors, are investing over these sorts of platforms, then you'll also probably want to support the businesses that you're basically lending money to as well. And so again, it has a really, really strong ecosystem around it as well. And just looking at the other side, the investor, really where the investor gains is obviously opportunity, asset class, and the ability to develop an overall portfolio which is diversified as well. So those are the key things where digital disruption is really good. The previous slide I showed you on basically the American landscape shows you that disruption is here. It's going to happen. It'll happen at an increasing pace. One thing that has taken off massively here is fintech. And a bit like if you went back a few years, you heard nothing in the news apart from how difficult it was for SMEs to get finance. Nowadays, it's primarily all around fintech. So Abu Dhabi is pushing it, Dubai is pushing it, Bahrain is pushing it, Saudi's pushing it, Qatar's a little bit behind the scene, but they're going to get there quite soon. And this is only good news for you as investors and also you as business owners as well. And that's it from me. So I'm actually going to be quite short and sweet. If you have any questions, please come and grab me afterwards. Alternatively, give me an email at peter@beehive.ae. Thank you.
As your business navigates a world overloaded with data and information, how do you process what's important and what's not? To share his expert insights and to enable you to use data for financial decision-making, please welcome to the stage Thomas Popp Madsen, Line of Business Finance Specialist, SAP.
So, good afternoon. Thank you for coming back after the coffee break. So, as you heard in the opening session this morning, or one of the early sessions, German companies only do one thing. I work for a small German company called SAP, and we try to do slightly more than one thing. But what I do in my day-to-day life is I travel around the MENA region talking to CFOs about their challenges and how we can help them. Now, for most of you, you would say, well, SAP isn't that for large corporations, right? How can they help us? And I think technology is actually helping SAP to bring it more relevant to the SMEs, but also some of the pressures that we see at the large corporations, they are coming down to you. Now, what I've been asked to talk about today is not how to preserve your cash flow or what is profit, etc. That has been covered in the sessions previously. But I've been asked to talk a little bit about how big data impacts the business models, how it impacts finance. So, with that, I want to start by talking about what is digitization or digitalization for businesses, right? So not necessarily for the CFO. So I'm sure you're all aware of speed, automation, and transparency. You know, it's about having data at your fingertips at all times and not wasting time with manual processes. Now, the idea of digitalization or digitization is to be able to do innovation faster. It is to be agile, right? It is to move faster. And a lot of the new business model actually involves a direct engagement, more than actually the traditional business way. So if we look at what it is we are trying to enable, it's the business models of the Uber of this world, where they're not bogged down in a cash flow because they actually don't own a single car. It's not the Airbnb, which doesn't have a hotel room or anything like that. What they do is they have technology. They can combine the supplier with the customer and take a small percentage of that. But we also talk to our customers. Our customers often have the challenge that they are threatened by these disruptive technologies. So an example is a customer we had who sold compressor air. So essentially what they did is they built compressors and they put air in containers and they sold it off. Then they started looking at their customers. What was this compressed air being used for? It wasn't just for scuba divers. It was actually for companies to keep their robotics going in their factories, right? So they redefined themselves and they said, well, if instead of selling compressed air, which is a very competitive market, you know, any day of the week another one can come in and do it cheaper, how can we redefine our business? So what they started selling to the factories would be uptime on the machinery, right? So they owned the responsibility. It wasn't some idiot in procurement who didn't order from them. They were actually making sure that everything was up and running. Now, if you think about that, how does big data play in? Why is that relevant for finance? Well, for finance, certainly it has an impact on the revenue model, right? It doesn't really improve the cash flow, but it could potentially improve the profit quite a bit. But secondly, finance take over some of the risk, right? Before we produce something and we sold it, now we sell a service. That means we have a risk. So what you need to do when you change your business model like that is you start looking into technologies that minimize that risk. So in this case, it was putting predictive engines out in the factories and sensors, so we made sure they didn't run out of air, or we didn't have a compressor that shut down. Because guess what? When you do these contracts, there's a huge fine if you don't deliver, right? So for finance, I don't think we should be leading the initiative in finance, but certainly we should be able to support it. We should be able to support it by going beyond finance and by having an agile system so we can change our business models. Now, that would all be very nice and very easy if finance didn't have to do anything else, right? But reality of the matter is that even with the new business models and competitors and all the worries we have there, we still have to deal with all the other challenges. So, I mean, we are almost done talking about the oil prices going down, but it is a massive, massive issue, right? We have a world that we don't really know where we're going with the whole Brexit, with the whole Trump. So all of that, we need to ensure that we are prudent enough to be able to survive. And on top of that, they come in with all the regulations and compliance areas. How many here are ready for VAT? Who's ready? So last week, a gentleman told me, it's going to be delayed. Don't worry about it. It's delayed. Well, guess what? It's been delayed once already. and I'm really not sure we can afford to delay it anymore, right? It's a way of funding the country. So I would suggest, if not talking to somebody like SAP about it, because it's really not a big issue, but there are certain things you need to start doing now. Talk to the Ernst & Youngs, talk to the SAPs about it, and get it sorted. It's not rocket science. How many of you are IFRS compliant? So there's a couple of you. Have you guys started looking at IFRS 16? Excellent. So the thing is that finance, in addition to being fancy and big data and all of that, you still have that responsibility of covering off regulations and compliance. And we are happy to help you with that as well. But what does it mean? Well, you still need the insight. So we rely on technology. Your workload has increased. Now, for finance people, it's often, I'm a finance person, so I'm allowed to say it. We often look at, come on, is that really important? If I get that report tomorrow, how big of a difference does it make? Well, it makes a difference if the competitor is more agile, if the competitor has the data, right? So we cannot sit back. We have to stay on the forefront. And a lot of technologies, and I'm not saying you need all of them, it depends on your business model, but a lot of technologies are coming into play in finance. So I'm not going to go into the technical aspects of it, but if we look at something like in memory, what that is about is to be able to get the results faster, right? And have a more agile way of querying the data. So that combined with user experience is actually about bringing finance out of finance. Now in the modern economy with the modern models, what we want to ensure is that if I as a business user have a problem, I don't have to run to my finance department, ask for a report, and I get the number a week or 2 weeks later. That should be accessible for me when I'm in front of the customer. If you go and have your car serviced at Alfortain, you will notice there's a service clerk who's having an iPad, right? When you're standing there in the morning and you say, I do have a problem with my exhaust pipe, he puts it in. All the back-end processes are being run in the ERP system. He can see if they have it in inventory, and hopefully they can get that car back to you at 12 o'clock so you can be on your way. All of that is enabled by having technology and better user experience, because when you go beyond finance, it has to be easy to use, right? Finance people, we are very good at going into 3 different systems and getting the number, but the idea is it should be accessible through a simple workflow. Then we're looking at something like robotics, right? Now, robotics and artificial intelligence are often being put in the same box. Robotics and machine learning, the way we're using that in finance is to do what's called light-out processing. Light-out processing is about if no human intervention is needed, then stop wasting your time doing it, right? Finance professionals are expensive because they have a finance degree, not because they're good at correcting an Excel sheet or moving data from A to B. So we need to be able to use machine learning to do all the tedious, repetitive processes that really just requires a simple answer. So for example, if you think about every time you have a mistake in a phone number, it might be because a plus is missing in front of the country code or 2 zeros are missing. It's not rocket science. It's very easy for a computer to learn it. So we do use machine learning, and we will see that it comes more and more into these systems when we have big data. Because of course, if you have 10 invoices, then it might be a little bit expensive to manage it. But if you have thousands and thousands, it makes more sense. The predictive aspect is when you move beyond planning, beyond finance within, or planning within finance, or budgeting within finance. So when we start expanding into new business models, of course we have an increased risk, but finance also becomes a partner in how do we get the most profit out of these new business models. And that actually means that when we start aggregating all this big data information from our systems, from our sensors, that should correlate directly to profit, to revenue models, to cash flow effects, and that's where predictive are being used. So predictive we use very much in predictive maintenance analysis, right? If we have increased business volume, we wear and tear more on our products or more on our machines, what is the impact of that? But also looking at customer segmentation, right? If you look at customers from a very aggregated level, it's very difficult to predict what is going to be the outcome of changing product mix. But if you have all the detailed information, you actually could start targeting the most profitable customers. Then we have something that we strongly believe in within SAP, which is the networks. So networks is actually the direct engagement model, right? What SAP offers is we offer for you to connect to customers or suppliers. Now, this is something that should be very interesting for SMEs because one of the big costs you would probably have is how do we get access to the customers? By logging onto a network, automatically you can put your products up there, and if you win the bidding, you get the deal. Now, there's a small fee for SAP for maintaining this system, but what it will actually mean is that you get access to a huge market that maybe you would have to pay much more to get access to. So at SAP, we do quite a bit of supporting these business networks, financial services networks, so we can connect you to the banks, Ariba, so we can connect you to your suppliers and possibly your customers. We do it for traveling, so you can book your hotels, etc., etc. But this is very compelling and should be very compelling for SMEs because it drives down cost. Now, a lot of what I've mentioned, you would be right to say, yeah, but we can't afford a predictive engine and we can't afford to buy a massive database with all this in-memory technology. I think the last thing on this slide is what makes it possible for you. It's the cloud technology, right? What the cloud technology does, it doesn't mean that we don't have to buy hardware. Of course we do, right? Of course we need somebody to manage the service for you. Of course we do. But we can take a good technician and cut him across 1,000 customers, right? We can give you a slice of a server and we can let it grow with you, right? So we have much more flexibility and agility. Now, one thing is it moves it from CAPEX to OPEX. That is true. I don't think over time it's necessarily a lot cheaper, but it does give you the flexibility and agility to grow as a business and not worry about it. So all of these technologies are in here. I think out of the 5 super technologies, the one technology that we don't see in finance yet is the 3D printing, but I'm sure it will come as well. Any questions to this? Anything that you find is missing? No? Huh? I try very fast, 10 minutes. So, the way we define it for finance, right, is we say it's real-time continuous processes with no manual processes or media breaks. It's never going to happen, right? There will always be the need for a finance person who can make that decision or that critical decision. But if you can get 80% of the work out of the way, and if you can make it, and if you can automate it, then do so, right? In order for you to be able to grow as a business. If you're not doing it, somebody else is doing it. And another thing is, let the data come out of finance. We call it, or I call it democratization of data. There's no power in you in finance owning the data. The data is there for the business to capitalize on. So make sure they can get access to it and be a business partner, right? Your job is not just to be a scorekeeper. Your job is to be a business partner. And that's what we work extremely hard to help our customers do. That is how we see finance. Any questions to this? I see that was the old presentation. I promised not to show anything technical. So if there are no questions, I'll hand it over to the next speaker.
No conversation is complete without addressing the most important aspect of any business, the human element. With everything you've heard today, how does your talent fit into the equation? Our next expert is someone who has extensive experience on this subject and will share his valuable insights. It is our pleasure to invite on stage Edward Matty, Managing Partner, CCM Consulting.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me here, and hopefully I know that I'm standing between you and lunch, and that's never a good spot to be, so we're going to have a bit of fun, and we're going to take a bit of a left turn when it comes to this conversation. And it's this topic of talent and how do we keep our gems. And often when we see the title cost management, that's the last time that you want to speak about talent and you've got cost management behind you, because it tends to be the first place we overlook, or worse, the first place that we tend to cut cost. So today I want to talk to you about this notion of talent and keeping those gems and what we have to do. And when we talk about the SME world, it's not so much always the small or the S in that SME, but rather that medium element. When we're a small organization, we tend to really value talent. We're still growing. Whomever we've got on board, we want to hang on to. We nurture these individuals. But as that organization grows, things start to change. This notion of the customer comes first, be it in your finance element or the C level. It's not always the case. And I've seen this very often with organizations who claim the customer comes first. However, you go to their operations and you see how they're set up, and the front of the business is actually reserved for the CEO or maybe the CFO or anything of the sort. We don't necessarily talk about that and the problem or the portrayal of the business to the outside world and to talent. And when I talk about the customer today, I'm not just talking about your end user. I'm talking about what we refer to as the internal customer. The talent within the organization, the people that make that business run every day. And as companies seem to grow, we go further and further into this ivory tower outlook. And we start to look at things in a little bit of a jaded perspective. We're sitting too far away from the business. We're sitting too far away from what we refer to as the fingertips of the organization. And when these individuals need us and need our help and want to grow and want to become a big part of our bottom line, we're not necessarily there for them. And in fact, it gets worse and worse as we move up the organization. It becomes like hierarchical warfare. That the one level down to the next level, it gets worse and worse in how we look after our talent. And that's something that really needs to change. We've got to be able to look at what we refer to as left brain and right brain working together. For those of you that are in accounting in the room, you often hear the term creative accounting. In my world, that's when your right brain is helping your left brain out. We've got a lot of left brain individuals. It's our logical sense, it's the element of mathematics and sciences, and we want to open up this right brain side, the creative element. How do we make sure that the talent we have in the organization understand how valuable they are and how they can benefit our bottom line? And I'm going to share some information with you a little bit later on as to why that's become so critical. If we ignore the talent in the organization for the sake of cost, this will cost us much more down the road, and that's something we have to be able to deal with. So what we talk about here is serving those fingertips, the internal customer well, ensuring that they're taken care of. Now, for me, that requires change. And change for many people, as much as we put it up as a title, is not a very comfortable element. We like to remain in our comfort zone. And I'm not asking you to leave here today and jump right out into your panic zone and create this wonderful organization with awesome culture, but it's about pushing yourself slightly out of that comfort zone into what we refer to as the stretch zone. So what is it that we're talking about? I want to share something with you that we refer to as the customer experience. And this relates to internal customer, your colleagues, your employees, your direct reports, whatever it is, as much as it does for the external customer. And I'm going to take a lesson out of the hospitality sector, a sector that's gotten it right over and over again, at least most people do. When we talk about the customer experience, we talk about three levels. The first of which we talk about, there are the implicits. These are the basic requirements that you have to achieve. In companies, that means giving somebody the job, making sure that they've got somewhere to work at, maybe a mobile phone, absolute basics that are there. And then we move on to what we refer to as expected. Anytime we join a job, a new job or a business, there are expectations that we have, just like your customers, your end users, have expectations when they're dealing with you. And they want to see those expectations met. But businesses do not thrive on simply meeting expectations. They go to the next level up, which is about impressing and delighting the customer. Businesses that get this right go a very, very long way. And whether you're talking about the Googles of the world, you're talking about Kareem, we heard that earlier, Uber, any of these kind of businesses, they go well above the expectation to ensure that they impress and delight. Now, let me share an example from the hospitality sector. Has anybody stayed at a hotel before? You must have. All right. Now, let me ask you, when you go to the hotel, there are certain things I expect to see in my hotel when I get there. And these are what I refer to the implicits. I want to make sure there's a TV. I want to make sure it's clean. There must be some soap, some towels. Ideally, there's a bed where I can sleep. These are implicits. I don't even question these when I check into the hotel. I make sure they have to be there, obviously, if it's an operational hotel. But then there's some expectations. And these expectations now today have changed maybe. I need a satellite wall-mounted TV. I'd like a coffee machine in my room. And not just any coffee machine. Maybe it needs to be an espresso. I've got to make sure that there's certain elements that are there. The mini bar. Maybe there's going to be my iron and iron stand. And a number of expectations that are there. But then there's a whole other level there of this notion of how do you impress and delight people? Let me ask you, for those of you that nodded when I asked you about a hotel, any idea, think about this for a second. When you show up to your hotel room, what is the first thing that you do when you get inside your room? Be honest. Air conditioning? Anyone else? The bathroom. The number one answer in every survey around the world is the first thing we tend to do is check the bathroom. I don't know what the obsession is. Maybe it's the little shampoo bottles. Maybe we want to make sure it's clean. But for some reason around the world, no matter what your culture is, the first thing you do is check the bathroom. Second thing happens to be the view. The third thing happens to be the comfort of the bed. Now, interestingly enough, a few years ago, I travel a lot. I travel about 180 days a year. And I got into one of the hotels that I checked into, and lo and behold, as usual, typical routine, I got in, dropped my bag, and I opened the bathroom door, as I always do. Now, this time around, though, I was in for a little bit of a surprise. When I opened the bathroom door and I looked over at where the bathtub is, let me share with you what was there. I found one of these sitting on my bathtub. Now, the very first thought I had was, housekeeping did not do a very good job. This is obviously from the guest before me. Maybe there was a kid there, but then I noticed there was a little tag on the duck. And it said, "We know that you've had a lengthy journey. We hope that you enjoy a bath and simpler times." And I thought to myself, wow, that's not bad. That's actually quite fantastic. It put me in a very good mood. And this is what I now refer to as the duck factor, because it actually impressed and delighted me. It put me in another experience with that particular hotel chain. And in fact, naturally, I stole the duck, of course, don't get me wrong. And for those of you in finance, this costs 20 cents. It's not a whole lot of money for the hotel. And since then, I've got about 9 ducks at home. I do collect them. Because that's what happens now. Every time I go into a hotel, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a duck, or metaphorically speaking, the equivalent of that duck. I go around my hotel room looking for what's there? What's there to excite me? What's there to impress and delight me? And here's the interesting part, though. Now, what used to impress and delight me has become an expectation. I remember the first time I checked into a hotel many, many years ago in business, and I found a fruit basket in my room. And I said, wow, I must be a VIP. I realize they do that for everybody. But today, if I walk into a hotel room and my fruit basket's not there, I say, well, where is my fruit basket? What was today's luxury becomes tomorrow's expectation. And the reason I bring this up here, not because I want you to go out to your companies and buy rubber ducks to give to everybody, but I want you to think about something. What is your duck factor in your business? What is it that you continually do in order to impress and delight your internal customer? What is it that you do to make sure that your employees show up and say, wow, I am absolutely thrilled to be working for this organization, and I would do whatever it takes. And this is critical. These are the things that we refer to when it comes to customer experience or internal customer, which is your talent. You see, when something goes well, when one of your managers or your employees does something well, and they treat the employee, your end user well, they tell people about it. In fact, today, on average, if I've received great service from your companies, I'll tell an average of 8 people about that. But here's the funny thing is, and this is what we refer to as moments of truth, and I'll explain that in a moment. That's the external experience. But what happens internally? What happens when your managers are walking around not speaking so pleasantly to your talent? And the experience starts to change there. And then, of course, we tell on average of 22 people about a negative experience with an organization. And today, with social media, that could potentially be thousands of people, in fact. But that experience, that negative experience, does not come from one employee. It comes on how we treat one another within the organization. It's how we deal with one another's employees and staffs and colleagues. And one bad thing goes on. Have you ever had this experience? You're having a very bad start to the day. In fact, your alarm didn't go off and you're running late. And you jump out of bed and you run out there and you finally, you shower, you get ready, you get into your car. It's bumper to bumper traffic on Sheikh Zayed Road. You simply cannot believe what's going on. You're finally close to home, close to your work, and you decide you're going to pull over to Starbucks, get a quick coffee. You're almost there anyway, and you're late, nevertheless. You pick up your Starbucks, you get out there, you accidentally hit the curb, and the Starbucks coffee now is all over your clothes. No time to go back home. You are in the worst possible mood that you can be in. You walk into your office, and your line manager does this. Good morning, Edward. And that's all they say, and that's enough. Because that will determine how you will treat your end user for the rest of the day. You cannot wait to release some of that anxiety, that anger and frustration that's within you. So it's that internal customer experience that makes far more value to us and the end user, and rather simply thinking, we're great with our customers. No, your customers, your talent are those that are inside the company. And that's where these moments of truth come in. A few years ago, when we started the business, one of our very first clients was Scandinavian Airlines. And we coined the term moments of truth. And it stands for never to be repeated opportunities to distinguish yourself from each and every one of your competitors in a memorable fashion. That's a moment of truth. And businesses are always faced with moments of truth. I would almost argue hundreds of them every day to differentiate themselves from each and every one of their customers in a memorable fashion. Each and every one of their competitors, pardon me. That's what we have to look for. Talent today has one eye out looking at the opportunities that are available and one eye inwards to see how am I treated by my company. Am I valued, or am I a line on the sheet, on the cost element that tells them, I'm not too sure. There's way too much money to spent on them. Take advantage of those moments of truth. You see, we make huge investments in companies. When we've got our buildings and our facilities, we spend an enormous amount on that, on what kind of fit out we want, what building do we want to be in Dubai. And then we get into the leadership level. And of course, the CEO needs a very large housing allowance and car allowance and all the fancy benefits that come with that. But when it comes to the talent within the organization, when we look at how do we develop our people and make sure that they stay and they deliver to our bottom line, the investments get thinner and thinner. In fact, cost cutting is one of the areas that we start to look at. So the picture doesn't look that great. We, in fact, don't look after those talent and the gems that we have. And we become one of those revolving door organizations. People are coming and going rather than staying with us and ensuring that that talent, that brain power they have, is being invested right here in our company. This is a very interesting study for those of you that might be a little bit hesitant to look at talent and say, does it really impact our bottom line? Several years ago, this was published in the Harvard Business Review that showed there's a direct correlation between internal service quality and revenue growth and profitability. This was one of the most earth-shattering reports that came out on the bottom line of companies when it comes to looking after the internal customer. That if we get that right, and we make sure that we take care of our employees, and in turn, they will look after our customers, and bottom line is, we'll have more profitability, and we'll see more revenue growth that comes out of there. That tells us that we have a responsibility to the people within the organization. And let me tell you about people in organizations. Does everyone know the little kids' cartoon or the storybooks, Winnie the Pooh? If you have kids, I suspect you do that. I have to bring up Winnie the Pooh. It's Canadian, if you didn't know that. So there's a little bit of a patriotism element that's there. Now, if you remember the characters in Winnie the Pooh, there's one particular character that's constantly excited. Anybody know any idea who that is? Shout it out if you remember. It's Tigger, the tiger. And Tigger is a very, very excited personality. He's always, in fact, the song goes bouncy, 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 bounce. He's one of those characters that's always happy, always excited. Yeah, let's go do this over here. Let's go do that over there. Constantly excited. And there are people in your organizations that are exactly like that. In fact, these are the super positive individuals in your organization. But then there's another group in the organization, another character in Winnie the Pooh that's always down on his luck. Any idea who that is? It's the donkey, Eeyore. And this guy walks around moping all the time. He doesn't like to be there. Oof, you want me to move from here to there? That looks like a lot of work. I'm not too sure about that, and so on. And these are the kind of people we have in our organizations. They're the super negative people. And they're absolutely toxic on a business. They're there. We can't ignore them. In fact, most studies show that we've got about 20% of the organization that's super positive and another 20% that's absolutely negative. No matter what you do as an employer, these individuals remain negative. But here's the interesting part. That leaves us another 60%. And in my little story of Winnie the Pooh, who might that be? That's Winnie. That's the bear. And Winnie the Pooh is a very nice character. However, he needs to be motivated. What motivates Winnie? Honey. Show me the honey. And they say, hey, you got honey? What do you want me to do? Jump over mountains? Leap through hoops of fire? No problem. But definitely motivate me that's there. What's interesting though, organizations, when we think about talent, we obsess over that super negative bottom 20. And we think we're convinced we can change these individuals. But rather we realize that the talent, those hidden gems, sit in that 60%, that if left to their own devices, will be very easily swayed by that bottom 20%. They'll be swayed over a cup of coffee or when they're getting some water from the kitchen or the pantry, and that's where the negativity starts. And that's what we have to look for. If we want to manage talent and we want to make sure we retain talent, it's that 60% in between, the Winnie the Poohs of the organization, that we have to go after and make sure that we create that duck factor for them, that we treat them right and show them that this is the organization they need to be in. Because people have a choice in life. You've got people, and if you've ever been to a supermarket, you know there's the baggers at the end of the checkout line. And sometimes you see some of these baggers and you look at them and you say, wow, this guy definitely woke up today and said, why am I even going to work? Their shirt is tucked out. They don't look very good. They're exhausted. They put the eggs at the bottom. They throw the cans on top of it, maybe some tomatoes that really mess things up. And they absolutely don't care. But then you look across the line and there's somebody that's well-groomed, excited and smiling. This is what we refer to as the double bagger of companies. And these are individuals, they're paid the same amount of money. They don't have more or less benefits than one another, but they make a decision in life. They make a decision that when I show up to work today, I'm going to be that double bagger. I'm going to go above and beyond the call of duty for my employer. Now it doesn't come out of thin air. For some people, it's a personality trait. For others, it's something that we have to work hard at. And this is something we refer to as employeeship. Employeeship is when an individual makes a wholehearted attempt and a goal-oriented effort in 3 particular areas. It's not one or the other, it's 3 particular areas, and when we do that, we achieve employeeship. What are these areas? The first of which is something that's very important to practically everybody here, productivity. We want to make sure people are productive, but we also tend to look at quality. You can't be productive and create poor quality results. But here's the third one that gets missed out, and that's relations. We tend to forget that organizations are made up of people. And people desperately need relationships. They need to feel a connection, an emotional element to that organization. And when we do that, we reach a level of that employeeship. When all of the employees are deadly committed, without a doubt, they're deeply committed to the survival and the development of your organization. When they're providing productivity, quality, and a sense of relationship within the organization, this is when they're demonstrating employeeship. So I would urge you as you leave here today, to think about this and think about what is it that we're doing to get the most of our employees, not just for the sake of the bottom line, but for the sake of the relationship that's being built, for the sake of the quality of what we do. Because as long as we can treat these individuals right, they will thank us or they will give in return to our bottom line as businesses. So talent, those gems that we have, are far more than simply numbers that show up on a balance sheet or on your income statement when you're looking at that. They're individuals that can make or break your business. I'm going to leave you with a bit of a quote here from one of my favorite individuals who passed on a couple of years ago, Maya Angelou. And Maya Angelou had said that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And no matter what your role in the organization, be it in finance or HR or at the C-suite level, in CEO level or anybody else there, it is about how we make individuals feel. And if we can get that right, I can assure you that internal service quality will have a direct effect on the bottom line of that organization. With that, I thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of this event and certainly the lunch that you have. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've now come to the end of a very productive day. Thank you for joining us, and a special thank you to all our partners for their support in putting this wonderful platform together. If you have registered for the Microsoft Business Cloud Workshop, please proceed to the registration desk for more information. For those that aren't part of the workshop, stay tuned to our platforms for a future opportunity. Thank you, and have a great day ahead.